questions in writing within the next 10 days. Staying at home indefinitely is not the solution to this pandemic. There is not enough money available to help all those hurt by a closed economy. All roads back to work and back to school lead through testing, tracking, isolation, treatment, and vaccines. This requires widespread testing. Millions more tests, created mostly by new technologies to identify those who are sick and who've been exposed so they can be quarantined, and by containing the disease in this way, give the rest of America enough confidence to go back to work and school. For the near term, to help make sure those 31,000 UT students and faculty members show up in August, we need widespread testing. Millions more tests, created mostly by new technologies, to identify those who are sick and who have been exposed so they can be quarantined. By containing the disease in this way, give the rest of America enough confidence to go back to work and back to school. Senator Murray.
Well, thank you.
Listening to an opening statement from Committee Chair Lamar Alexander at the Senate hearing on reopening the economy during the coronavirus pandemic. We're now hearing from the top Democrat on the Senate Help Committee, Patty Murray of Washington State. This is Bloomberg Radio.
And as everyone works to take appropriate safety precautions today, I'd like to thank not only our witnesses for joining us today, but also our committee staff for working to set up a safe format for members and witnesses and the public to participate in this hearing remotely. Families across the country are counting on us for the truth about the COVID-19 pandemic, especially since it is clear they will not get it from President Trump. Truth is essential, so people have the facts, so they can make decisions for themselves and their families and their communities. Lives are at stake. If the president isn't telling the truth, we must, and our witnesses must, and we're counting on you today. And families need us to take this opportunity to dig into the facts about where things did go wrong so we can finally get them on track. Because the Trump administration's response to this public health emergency so far has been a disaster all on its own. Delays, missteps have put us way behind where we need to be on diagnostic tests and allowed inaccurate antibody tests to flood the market. Corruption and political interference have impeded efforts to secure desperately needed personal protective equipment and promoted dangerous, unproven treatments. And we recently learned that after experts at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention spent weeks developing a detailed guide to help our communities understand how to safely reopen when the time comes, the Trump administration tossed it in the trash bin for being too prescriptive. But this is far from the first time this administration has silenced experts who were doing their job and putting public health first. The fact of the matter is, President Trump has been more focused on fighting against the truth than fighting this virus, and Americans have sadly paid the price. Since this committee last heard from these witnesses on March 3rd, we have seen over 900 deaths in my home state of Washington, over 80,000 deaths nationally, and the numbers continue to climb. Still, President Trump is trying to ignore the facts and ignore the experts who've been very clear we are nowhere close to where we need to be to reopen safely. My hope today is that we can cut through this and have a serious discussion about what is needed to safely open, how close we are as a country to meeting those needs, and how we actually get there. One thing that's abundantly clear, we need dramatically more testing. It is unacceptable we still don't have a national strategic plan to make sure testing is free, fast, and everywhere. That is why I fought to make sure our last COVID-19 package included an initial $25 billion testing fund and a requirement that the administration submit a plan by May 24th. And when I say a plan, I don't mean a PR plan. I mean a plan with specific timelines and numeric goals for supply and funding needs, one that actually addresses the issues we're seeing on testing capacity and distribution and disparities and building out our public health system, and makes clear to states and tribes and employers and the American people what they can expect and what the administration will do to keep Americans safe. But testing alone won't be enough to reopen our country. We still need far more personal protective equipment that has been available for our healthcare workers on the front lines. And we will need far more for other workers as we reopen. So we desperately need this administration to step up and get that equipment to states who are doing everything in their power to purchase supplies, but simply cannot get nearly enough. Because the reality is, unlike states, the federal government has the tools to actually fix the problem, if only the administration would use them. And we also need that equipment to actually work, and for the FDA to act promptly if it does not weeks later when people may have already been exposed. And just as importantly, we can't expect people to go back to work or to restaurants or to confidently send their kids to school if there isn't clear, detailed guidance about how to do that safely. Schools, from early childhood through college, need to know how to keep their students, their staff, and their educators safe. When should they wear masks? How do you run a school cafeteria or a school bus? And if they can't reopen classrooms, schools and families need to know we are working to ensure every student gets an education. Tools like online learning can only get us so far if we don't address the digital divide so that every student can access them. And even then, there will be learning loss that could deepen existing educational disparities among low-income students, students with disabilities, English language learners, and other vulnerable populations if we don't make sure they get equal access to resources and support. And of course, schools aren't the only workplaces we've got to be thinking about. We need to make sure that industries across the country know how to safely reopen and that people know their workplace is safe. Secretary Scalia needs to stop dragging his feet and do his job and have the Department of Labor set forward a rule that makes clear worker safety is not optional. Mr. Chairman, I hope this committee can hear about those critical issues from Secretary Scalia and Secretary DeVos, as well as other experts in the space in the days ahead. And this is especially important to protect workers and residents at our nursing homes and other congregate care facilities, where we've seen some of the most deadly outbreaks. And as the rash of outbreaks at meatpacking plants shows, this isn't just an issue for the healthcare industry, it is an issue for everyone. And just as we need a plan before we can start to reopen, we also need a plan well before we have a safe and effective vaccine to guarantee that we can quickly produce and distribute it on a global scale and make it free and available for everyone. So I'll be asking about our progress on those issues today. Today, safely reopening our country may be a ways off, and the administration's planning may be way behind. But there's still a lot that Congress needs to do. There isn't time to spare. Some, including the White House, say we've already provided enough economic relief. Well, my question to them is, what good is a bridge that only gets you to the middle of the river? We don't need to wait around to see if people need more help. We know they do. We need to work quickly on another aggressive relief package, and we need to make sure our priorities in that bill are protecting our workers, our students, and our families, and addressing this public health crisis, not bailing out corporations or protecting big business from accountability. People across the country are doing their part. They are washing their hands and wearing masks and social distancing and staying home. They need their government to do its part too. They need leadership. They need a plan. They need honesty, and they need it now before we reopen, so they can rest assured that we are doing things safely and competently with their health and well-being as a top priority. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Democrat Patty Murray, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Health Committee, at this hearing on safely getting back to work and school during the coronavirus pandemic. Now turn to opening statements from the witnesses at this hearing. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
Members of this committee, I believe, one more Republican than Democrat. We have some very strong views, but we're able to work together and to express those views and respect each other and our witnesses. And I And a big part of that goes to Senator Murray and her staff, so thank you for that. Each witness will have up to 5 minutes to give his testimony. Thank you for making an exception and agreeing to testify by video because of these unusual circumstances, and thank you for what you're doing for our country. Our first witness is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He's director of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at the National Institutes of Health. He's held that position since 1984, which meant he's advised 6 presidents and worked on HIV, AIDS, influenza, malaria, Ebola, and other infectious diseases. He was involved in treating Ebola patients at NIH and also worked on vaccine trials for Ebola. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Robert Redfield. He's director of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which has its headquarters in Atlanta. More than 30 years, he's been involved with clinical research related to chronic human viral infections and infectious diseases, especially HIV. He was the founding director of the Department of Retroviral Research within the U.S. military's HIV research program. He spent 20 years with the U.S. Army Medical Corps. Third, Admiral Brett Giroir. Admiral Giroir is Assistant Secretary for Health at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. That puts him in charge of development of public health policy recommendations. He's taken on the responsibility for coordinating testing and focused on the increasing number of tests that we can do with existing technology. His federal service includes a variety of activities with our Defense Department in advanced research, threat reduction. He was part of the Blue Ribbon Panel to reform the U.S. Veterans Health System. And finally, we'll hear from Dr. Stephen Hahn. He's Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. Before joining FDA, he was the Chief Medical Executive of the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. He was chair of the Department of Radiation Oncology at the University of Pennsylvania. He was a senior investigator at the National Institutes of Health. He was commander of the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps in 2025. Now we'll ask each of our witnesses to summarize their remarks in 5 minutes. Following that, each senator will have 5 minutes for questions and answers in order of seniority. Dr. Fauci, let's begin with you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamar Alexander, Tennessee. We'll now hear from Dr. Anthony Fauci, Director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
Today, the role of the National Institutes of Health in research addressing COVID-19. The strategic plan that we have is fourfold. One, to improve our fundamental knowledge of the virus and the disease it causes. Next, to develop new point-of-care diagnostics. Next, to characterize and test therapeutics. And finally, to develop safe and effective vaccines. First, with regard to diagnostics. As you probably heard from Dr. Francis Collins last Thursday, the NIH has developed a rapid acceleration of diagnostics program called RADx, with an award to that specific program up to $500 million to support the development of COVID-19 diagnostics. It is a national call for innovative technologies that will be evaluated in a Shark Tank-like selection process to get to either success or failure rapidly. Moving on to therapeutics, I'll talk a bit about the remdesivir success antiviral in a moment. But let me emphasize that there are a number of broad-spectrum antivirals that are in various stages of testing. In addition, we will be looking at convalescent plasma, which is plasma from individuals who've recovered from COVID-19, to be used in passive transfer, either in prevention or treatment. In addition, hyperimmune globulin, which can be used as a gamma globulin shot. We'll be looking at repurposed drugs, as well as immune-based therapies and host modifiers, and finally, monoclonal antibodies. Let me take a moment to describe the remdesivir placebo-controlled randomized trial, which was done internationally with a power of more than 1,000 individuals in sites throughout the world. It was in hospitalized patients with lung disease. The endpoint was primarily time to recovery. The result was statistically significant, but really modest. And we must remember, it was only a modest result, showing that the drug made a 31% faster time to recovery. We hope to build on this modest success with combinations of drugs and better drugs. Moving on to vaccines. There are at least 8 candidate COVID-19 vaccines in clinical development. The NIH has been collaborating with a number of pharmaceutical companies at various stages of development. I will describe one very briefly, which is not the only one, but one that we have been involved in heavily developing with Moderna. It's a messenger RNA platform. You might recall in this committee that in January of this year, I said that it would take about 1 year to 18 months if we were successful in developing a vaccine. The NIH trial moved very quickly. On January 10th, the sequence was known. On January the 11th, the Vaccine Research Center met to develop a plan. And on the 14th of January, we officially started the vaccine development. 62 days later, we are now in phase 1 clinical trial with the 2 doses already fully enrolled. There will be animal safety. The phase 1 will directly go into phase 2-3 in late spring and early summer. And if we are successful, we hope to know that in the late fall and early winter. There are some important issues, however, in COVID-19 vaccine development. We have many candidates and hope to have multiple winners. In other words, it's multiple shots on goal. This will be important because this will be good for global availability if we have more than one successful candidate. We also, as the chairman mentioned, will be producing vaccine at risk, which means we'll be investigating considerable resources in developing doses even before we know any given candidate or candidates work. I must warn that there's also the possibility of negative consequences, where certain vaccines can actually enhance the negative effect of the infection. The big unknown is efficacy. Will it be present or absent, and how durable will it be? And finally, I want to mention the NIH has launched a public-private partnership called Accelerating COVID-19 Therapeutic Interventions and Vaccines. The purpose of that is to prioritize and accelerate clinical evaluation of therapeutic candidates with near-term potential. Hopefully, our research efforts, together with the other public health efforts, will get us quickly to an end to this terrible ordeal that we are all going through. Thank you very much. Happy to answer questions later.
This is Dr. Anthony Fauci of the National Institutes of Health.
Dr. Redfield, welcome.
Good morning, Chairman Alexander and Ranking Member Murray, members of the committee.
Redfield, Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in a Senate hearing on safely getting back to work and school during the COVID-19 outbreak. Live coverage on Bloomberg Radio.
We have tried and true effective public health interventions, such as early case identification, isolation, and contact tracing, combined with important mitigation strategies to include social distancing, frequent hand washing, and face covering. These public health tools have and will continue to slow the spread of COVID-19. I appreciate the opportunity this morning to provide a brief overview of some of CDC's ongoing work in response to COVID-19. CDC has been working 24/7 to combat the pandemic. CDC's Emergency Operations Center is supporting state, tribal, local, and territorial public health partners in building core capabilities, particularly workforce, laboratory, and data and predictive analytics. Epidemiologists are conducting surveillance for COVID-19 as well as conducting health system surveillance. Community mitigation teams are providing guidance on infection control and contact tracing. And our laboratory experts are performing serological testing to better define the extent of asymptomatic populations. As local leadership makes decisions to reopen, they'll require varying degrees of federal support. Each location will be different and will face unique circumstances. CDC has conducted a state-by-state assessment of public health testing capacity and contact tracing capacity, as well as surge plans. CDC is providing technical assistance and funding to the states provided through the Supplemental CARES Act and the Paycheck Protection Program and Healthcare Enhancement Act. We're working directly with the state public health leaders to define their needs for testing and testing devices, supplies, and manpower, surveillance, data collection and reporting, contact tracing, infection control, and outbreak investigation. I want to spend a moment to focus on several key elements. First, testing. Rapid, extensive, and widely available timely testing is essential for reopening America. CDC's role in testing continues to support diagnosis and contact tracing, surveillance, and outbreak. And we work with the public health partners to define their particular testing strategy for their jurisdiction. Admiral Giroir will address the testing components of the response in greater detail. Contact tracing. Increasing state, tribal, local, and territorial contact tracing capacity is critical. It's a critical part to stop the chains of transmission and prevent the occurrence of sustained community transmission. CDC's role is to provide technical training, assistance, and support to the states as they hire and build a workforce necessary to be fully prepared to effectively respond to the public health challenges posed by the ongoing COVID pandemic. This will be an expansive effort. Surveillance. Our nation's surveillance program is built on a combination of systems, including existing syndromic, influenza, and respiratory viral disease surveillance systems that have been combined with commercial and research lab platforms and our case reporting form system. CDC is adapting these and optimizing it to have a surveillance system in response to COVID-19. Importantly, in light of the significant occurrence of asymptomatic infection, the surveillance for asymptomatic infection becomes an important public health tool for early case identification. CDC is working with each public health jurisdiction to develop a prospective surveillance program to include active surveillance among those that are most vulnerable, such as individuals in long-term care facilities, inner-city clinics, and homeless shelters. We need to rebuild our nation's public health infrastructure. Data and data analytics, public health laboratory resilience, and our nation's public health workforce. Now is the time to put it in place for the generations to come, not only for the public health system that our nation needs, but for the public health system that our nation deserves. Before I close, I want to recognize the tireless commitment of the dedicated CDC staff who've deployed to every corner of this nation to fight COVID-19. More than 4,000 employees have deployed here and globally. Science and data continue with technical expertise and public service to be the backbone of CDC's contributions to the U.S. response. I extend my serious gratitude to the healthcare workers in the front lines, as well as their family, and the essential emergency personnel, as well as the American people, to say thank you for adhering to the stay-at-home guidelines and protecting the most vulnerable. It's important to emphasize that we're not out of the woods yet. Battle contends and we must, but we are more prepared. We need to stay vigilant with social distancing. It remains an imperative. We are a resilient nation, and I am confident that we will emerge from this pandemic stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
CDC
Redfield.
Director Dr. Robert Redfield will now get an opening statement from Admiral Giroir, Assistant Health Secretary, at the Senate hearing on getting back to work in school during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Progress in testing for COVID-19. On March 12th, Secretary Azar requested that I lead the COVID-19 testing efforts within HHS, including oversight and coordination of the FDA and CDC with regard to testing. Since then, the nation has performed more than 9 million COVID-19 tests, a number far greater than any other country and double the per capita tests performed to date in South Korea. To reach this point, we implemented a phased approach to meet testing needs during mitigation and now during phase 1 reopening of America. Beginning March 20th, we pioneered 41 community-based drive-through testing sites in locations prioritized by the CDC. These sites have been a profound success, testing over 167,000 high-risk individuals and demonstrating a prototype that is being duplicated multifold in nearly every state. Next, the administration leveraged trusted retailers, including CVS, Rite Aid, Walgreens, Walmart, Kroger, and Health Mart, who are now providing testing at 240 locations in 33 states, 69% of which are in communities with moderate to high social vulnerability. To meet the need for collection supplies, like swabs and media tubes, we first secured the global supply chain through a military air bridge. We worked directly with manufacturers to increase domestic production. We collaborated with the private sector and the FDA to validate multiple swab and media types that vastly expanded supplies while minimizing the need for PPE. Finally, we used Title III of the Defense Production Act to further invest in domestic manufacturing to prepare us for reopening. To support the need for surveillance testing during reopening, on April 27th, we issued a new testing framework that also prioritized testing for persons without symptoms who are prioritized by health departments or clinicians for any reason, including screening of asymptomatic individuals according to state and local plans. Next, our federal multidisciplinary team conducted multiple calls with leadership from each state to set state-specific testing objectives. Collectively, states and territories established an overall goal to perform 12.9 million tests over the next 4 weeks. The federal government is able to and will support the achievement of this goal. Specifically, the federal government is shipping to states 12.9 million swabs and over 9.7 million tubes of media in May alone. Last month, we also detailed the location and capacity of every lab machine in every state that could potentially run COVID-19 assays, and our team has worked with test suppliers to match reagents to these machines. Looking forward, between now and the end of 2020, the federal government will procure over 135 million swabs and 132 million tubes of media and distribute these to states as requested to supplement the now robust commercial supply. We anticipate marked increases in current tests, as well as a dramatic expansion of new point-of-care tests, like the first-in-class Quidel antigen test authorized by the FDA just last Friday. Quidel anticipates being able to distribute 300,000 tests per day within just a few weeks. So by September, taking every aspect of development, authorization, manufacturing, and supply chain into consideration, we project that our nation will be capable of performing at least 40 to 50 million tests per month if needed at that time. And if new technologies are authorized, like whole genome sequencing approaches or any novel solutions uncovered by NIH's new diagnostics initiative, that number will be much higher. Finally, I want to acknowledge and express my heartfelt gratitude to the officers of the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps, the uniformed service I am honored to lead. 3,471 men and women have deployed in support of this pandemic, on the cruise ship in Japan, to our military bases repatriating Americans, to our community-based testing sites and international airports, to FEMA and our task forces, to nursing facilities, including King County, Washington, and to field hospitals and hard-hit communities across our nation. I thank each and every one of these officers and their families, and on their behalf, I thank the members of this committee for supporting our training needs and the establishment of a ready reserve to supplement our ranks in future national emergencies. Thank you for the opportunity to provide these remarks.
It was Assistant Health Secretary Brett Giroir. We'll now hear from FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn at a Senate hearing on reopening the economy during the coronavirus outbreak. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you for inviting me to participate in this hearing today. I first want to start by thanking the American people for their incredible efforts at mitigation and extend my condolences to those who have lost loved ones. From day one of this pandemic, the 18,000 FDA employees, who are just incredible scientists, doctors, and nurses, have taken an active role in the all-of-government response to this pandemic. FDA has worked to facilitate the development of medical countermeasures to diagnose, treat, and prevent COVID-19. We've worked closely with laboratories, manufacturers, academia, product developers, our federal partners, and companies that don't even make medical products but want to pitch in, for example, by making hand sanitizer, personal protective equipment, and ventilators. Every decision we have made have been driven by data with the goal of protecting the health of the American people. In a public health emergency, however, our response has balanced the urgent need to make medical products available with the provision of a level of oversight that helps ensure the safety and effectiveness of those medical products. I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you what FDA is doing to help the country at this point, and Americans judge is safe to return to work and to school. It starts with testing, as others have mentioned. FDA has worked with more than 500 developers who have or said they will be submitting emergency use authorization requests for COVID-19 tests. This includes some newer technologies that heretofore have not been used as part of diagnostic tests in response to a pandemic. We have issued 92 individual emergency use authorizations for test kit manufacturers and laboratories, and we've been informed by more than 250 laboratories they have begun testing under the regulatory flexibilities we outlined in March. We are conducting rolling reviews of EUA submissions so that we can quickly authorize tests in which the data support. In a public health emergency, the accuracy of diagnostic tests is important, not only for the individual patient, but for the patient at large, for the public at large. FDA is helping to ensure the availability of tests that are providing accurate answers. We are also monitoring the marketplace for fraudulent tests and are taking appropriate action to protect the public health. And we are working to provide more clarity about which tests have been reviewed and authorized by FDA and which have not. Serologic tests will play a role in our recovery. Unlike diagnostic tests, which detect the presence of the virus, serologic tests measure the amount of antibodies or protein present in the blood when the body is responding to an infection like COVID-19. These tests can help identify individuals who can overcome an infection and who have developed an immune response. We will continue working with labs, manufacturers, and across the government to find a balance between the assurance that an antibody test is accurate and timely access to such tests. Of course, the way we will eventually beat this virus is with a vaccine, and FDA is working closely with our Fed partners, including the NIH, vaccine developers, manufacturers, and experts across the globe. We intend to use our regulatory flexibility to help ensure the most efficient development of a safe and effective vaccine to prevent COVID-19. Until a preventative vaccine is approved, however, we need medical products to bridge the gap. FDA has been working for several months to facilitate the development and availability of therapeutics as expeditiously as possible. And we've created an emergency program for this acceleration called the Coronavirus Treatment Acceleration Program, or CTAP. We have reassigned staff to work with urgency to review requests from companies, scientists, doctors who are developing therapies, and we're using every available authority and regulatory flexibility that's appropriate to facilitate the development of safe and effective products to treat COVID-19. A variety of therapeutic areas are being evaluated, as mentioned by Dr. Fauci and others, including antiviral drugs and immunotherapies, as well as convalescent plasma, hyperimmune globulin, and monoclonal antibodies. As Dr. Fauci also mentioned, we recently announced the positive results of the NIAID trial of remdesivir and issued an EUA for the treatment of hospitalized patients with COVID-19. Two other promising treatments that I mentioned are the antibody-rich products, convalescent plasma and hyperimmune globulin, and I am certainly willing to go into more detail if members of this committee have questions about this. But we are working very aggressively and closely with stakeholders to facilitate the development of monoclonal antibodies, which, if shown to be safe and effective, could act as a bridge therapy to the development of a vaccine. We recognize that developing vaccines and therapies need to go hand in hand with ensuring that there will be sufficient supplies for our country. So we're also working with manufacturers to make sure that this supply chain is robust. Mr. Chairman, ranking member, and members of the committee, please know that in FDA you have a dedicated team of some of the nation's finest scientists, healthcare providers, and public health professionals. We are guided by science and data, and we won't let up until we facilitate the development of products that our nation needs to get back to work. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hahn. And
that was the Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, Dr. Stephen Hahn, concluding opening statements at the Senate Health Committee hearing on reopening the economy during the coronavirus outbreak. We will now begin the questions from the senators on the committee. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Democrats. Each senator has, if you're by video conference, you have a little time clock at the bottom, and I would ask you to try to stay within 5 minutes for your questions and answers. I will start. I've got a question for Dr. Fauci and then Admiral Giroir. Let's look down the road 3 months. There will be about 5,000 campuses across the country trying to welcome 20 million college students, 100,000 public schools welcoming 50 million students. What would you say to the Chancellor of the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, or the president or the principal of a public school about how to persuade parents and students to return to school in August? Let's start with treatments and vaccines first. Dr. Fauci, if you could save about half of my 5 minutes for Admiral Giroir for testing, I would appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, I would be very realistic with the Chancellor and tell him that when we're thinking in terms...
It's a her in this case.
Oh, okay, I would tell her, I'm sorry, sir, that in this case, that the idea of having treatments available or a vaccine to facilitate the reentry of students into the fall term would be something that would be a bit of a bridge too far. As I mentioned, the drug that has shown some degree of efficacy was modest, and it was in hospitalized patients, not yet or maybe ever to be used either yet as prophylaxis or treatment. So if the issue is that the young individuals who will be going back to school would like to have some comfort in that there's a treatment, probably the thing that would be closest to utilization then would likely be passive transfer of convalescent serum. But we're really not talking about necessarily treating a student who gets ill, but how the student will feel safe in going back to school. If this were a situation where we had a vaccine, that would really be the end of that issue in a positive way. But as I mentioned in my opening remarks, even at the top speed we're going, we don't see a vaccine playing in the ability of individuals to get back to school this term. What they really want is to know if they are safe. And that's the question that'll have to be due with what we discussed earlier about testing. So I'm about halfway through the remarks. I'd like to just pass the baton to Admiral Giroir, who would address the question of the availability of testing and what role that might play in returning to school. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci. And Admiral Giroir, you said that while we're doing about 10 million tests this month, that we might be as high as 40 or 50 million by September and a month, which is a significant increase. So if I'm Chancellor of the University of Tennessee, could I develop a strategy where I'd say to all my students, we have, for example, an antigen test, which is quick and easy. You want everybody on campus to come by and take it once before you begin school. That will at least let everybody know that on that day we've isolated anybody who's positive, and then we can continue to monitor. Is that strategy possible in August and September?
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I may reserve 20 seconds for Dr. Redfield as well. The strategy that's going to be employed really depends heavily on what's the community spread at that time. If there's almost no community spread, your strategy will be different. If there's high community spread, it will also be different. But yes, technically, we will have the ability, and your Chancellor will have the ability. We expect there to be 25 to 30 million point-of-care tests per month available. It is certainly possible to test all of the students, or it is much more likely that there would be a surveillance strategy done where you may test some of the students at different times to give an assurance that there's no circulation, and that would be done in conjunction with the CDC and the local health department. There's also strategies that are still needing to be validated, but of pooling samples. We know in some experimental labs as many as 10 or 20 samples can be pooled, so essentially one test could test 20 students. And finally, there are some experimental approaches that look interesting, if not promising, that, for example, wastewater from an entire dorm or an entire segment of a campus could be tested to determine whether there's coronavirus in that sewerage, the wastewater. So there are other strategies being developed, and I'd like to at least give 20 seconds to Dr. Redfield, who really will be working on the strategy of how to employ the test given different community spread.
That was Assistant Health Secretary Fred Giroir.
Yeah, just some quick comments, sir. I mean, first, I think it's really important to evaluate critically the role of changes in social distancing on college campuses and schools and the situation, not to forget the importance of what we've learned. Clearly, also developing an aggressive program for wellness education, making sure people understand when they're symptomatic, they need to seek evaluation. I think you are going to have to look at the role of testing. I think there is going to be an important role of testing in this circumstances, and I think it will be individualized based on where these different schools are, how much infection is in that.
I'm going to wrap it up there so I can set a good example for the other senators with their 5 minutes. Senator Murray.
Now questioning from the Democratic side, the top Democrat on the Senate Health Committee, Patty Murray of Washington State.
All of our witnesses. Dr. Fauci, you have warned of needless suffering and death if we push to reopen too soon. But the president has actually been sending the opposite message. I want to ask you today, what is the most important message you have for communities and states that are reopening, even as our public health experts make it clear it's too soon? Tell us what the consequences are.
Thank you very much for that question, Senator Murray. As I've said many times publicly, what we have worked out is a guideline framework of how to safely open America again. And there are several checkpoints in that, with a gateway first of showing, depending on the dynamics of an outbreak in a particular region, state, city, or area, that would really determine the speed and the pace with which one does re-enter or reopen. So my word has been, and I've been very consistent in this, that I get concerned if you have a situation where the dynamics of an outbreak in an area are such that you are not seeing that gradual over 14-day decrease that would allow you to go to phase 1. And then if you pass the checkpoints of phase 1, go to phase 2 and phase 3. What I've expressed then and again is my concern that if some areas, cities, states, or what have you, jump over those various checkpoints and prematurely open up without having the capability of being able to respond effectively and efficiently, my concern is that we will start to see little spikes that might turn into outbreaks. So therefore, I have been being very clear in my message to try to the best extent possible to go by the guidelines, which have been very well thought out and very well delineated.
So if a community or a state or a region doesn't go by those guidelines and reopen, the consequences could be pretty dire, correct?
The consequences could be really serious, particularly, and this is something that I think we also should pay attention to, that states, even if they're doing it at an appropriate pace, which many of them are and will, namely a pace that's commensurate with the dynamics of the outbreak, that they have in place already the capability that when there will be cases, there is no doubt, even under the best of circumstances, when you pull back on mitigation, you will see some cases appear. It's the ability and the capability of responding to those cases with good identification, isolation, and contact tracing will determine whether you can continue to go forward as you try to reopen America. So it's not only doing it at the appropriate time with the appropriate constraints, but having in place the capability of responding when the inevitable return of infections occur.
Well, thank you for that. And it's very clear in order to do that, we need knowledge, which is about testing. And for months, this administration's approach to testing has really been plagued by unrealized goals and disregard for systemic problems within that supply chain. And last week, an average of just 250,000 tests per day were performed in the United States. That is a small fraction of what we need. And yesterday, President Trump had the gall to declare the U.S. had, quote, prevailed on testing in a press conference that was filled with misinformation and distortions. Dr. Gerard, public health experts do not think the U.S. has prevailed. I'm glad you finally committed that states, including my home state of Washington, will receive enough tests to meet their goals for May and June. But this administration has had a record of giving us broken promises that more tests and supplies are coming, and they don't. And we know, by the way, that testing is needs will persist long past June, long past. So I wanted to ask you today, will the administration's forthcoming strategic plan that is now required under the COVID package that was just passed and signed into law, will that strategic plan on testing include specific numeric targets for testing capacity, supply chain capacity, and projection of shortages?
Thank you for that question and statement, Senator Murray. Yes, we are, as I've stated, we continue to have a work in progress as we build the testing capacity. We have established the targets with the states of over 12 million tests over the next 4 weeks. We think those targets are going to be good in May and June. But as Dr. Fauci said, we really have to be evidence-based. We expect those targets to go up as we progressively open, as communities go through phase 1 and then into phase 2. And certainly those numbers will need to go up significantly again in the fall when we potentially have influenza circulating with COVID. So yes, there will be targets. The targets will need to change based on the evidence that we see, but we are highly committed to securing the supply chain. We work daily with every manufacturer, and I'm just pleased we're in May and June able to get ahead of the states so that we can supply them what they need so they have those assurances. So there's not going to be any doubts about that.
My question to you is, when you put out that specific plan that you are required to do, we will see numbers that you are going to tell us that you will reach, targeted for testing and supply chain capacity and projection of sort. Instead of just saying we hope to have 1 million this week, next week, so you will give us the specific targets, correct?
We know specific. I'll say yes, ma'am. We know the specific amounts of tests we have over the summer.
How many we need?
So yes, ma'am. We developed the need statements by working with the states individually, with epidemiologists, with the CDC, so that overall in May we'll be testing about 3.9% of the overall U.S. population.
But what I'm telling you,
well over time, Senator Murray,
how many we have, but how many we will need, not just for May, but in the coming months, so that we can be prepared to have them.
Yes, ma'am, and not to be repetitive, but we need to be evidence and data driven, because what we may see in May or June will drive differences in the amount of test goals we have. So we really just need to be very humble about this. We need to look at the data. We know that the testing needs will go up over May and June as we progressively open, and we will do our best to predict that. But you have to understand, we have to see what the data and the evidence show at that time.
Okay, I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, again, what our strategic plan requires is what is the goal? Not how many we have, but how many we need, and that's what we'll be looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murray.
Patty
Senator
Murray wrapping up her questioning with Assistant Health Secretary Brett Giroir.
I particularly appreciated your opening statement where you had a very succinct list of preparations we need to learn from this pandemic for the next one. Not only should we be working on this and preparing, but we need to look at the future too. And I think we've learned a lot. We're fighting a virus at the same time that scientists are learning about it. So we need to be nimble. We also need to be sure that we are prepared for a second wave of outbreaks that could coincide with the start of the flu season, potentially stressing our healthcare system even more than it already has been.
This is Republican Senator Michael Enzi of Wyoming.
I thank you for your comments. I think they've been comforting about what has been done and what can be done. I agree with Senator Murray that we need to have some specific goals. As an accountant, that's always one of the things that I'm looking for. For questions, Dr. Hahn, our understanding of the clinical picture of COVID-19 continues to evolve. What first looked like a respiratory illness now seems much more comprehensive, potentially affecting the heart, the brain, the kidneys, and other organs. How does this evolving picture impact the ability to evaluate the appropriate clinical or surrogate endpoints for review of vaccines and treatment?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. The evolving clinical picture, and obviously the way this is manifesting around the country clinically, does in fact inform the endpoints that we will work with developers of therapies on, so that we can get the absolute most efficient, but also the most accurate information and appropriate endpoints to make the necessary authorizations and approvals. We have set up this program called the Coronavirus Treatment Acceleration Program, where our top scientists and clinicians have been at the table consulting with our colleagues at NIH and CDC to actually address those questions. What are the appropriate endpoints? I'll give you an example. We do know that in some circumstances, patients who've had severe COVID disease have developed thrombotic or clotting type episodes. And so we prioritize a review of agents that we think might be beneficial. And obviously the clinical endpoints for those trials will be different than an agent that's an antiviral like remdesivir, whereas Dr. Fauci mentioned we're looking at time to recovery. So we want to adapt it to the clinical circumstance as well as to the type of therapy that's put before us.
It was FDA Commissioner
Thank you.
Stephen Hahn.
Another question to Dr. Hahn. We have made a lot of progress in vaccine development already, but BARDA has identified that domestic manufacturing of needles and syringes is a significant gap in pandemic preparedness. What has HHS done in advance of a potential national vaccination campaign to ensure that we have sufficient capacity to administer a vaccine?
Senator Enzi, thank you for that question. This is a really important point because, as you mentioned, it's not just about the vaccine or hopefully vaccines that are developed. It's all about it's also about the supplies that are needed as well as an operational plan for administering the vaccine. So this is an all-of-government approach. There is a program that's been set up called Operation Warp Speed that includes Dr. Collins, Dr. Fauci, his colleagues at NIH, the Department of Defense, as well as other members of HHS and FDA. Dr. Peter Marks from our Center for Biological Evaluation Research has been helping coordinate that, is working very closely with Dr. Fauci and his team. And we've created what's called a Gantt chart to look forward. What are the necessary supply chain issues, syringes, needles, et cetera, depending on the various vaccines that are being developed, how many times they have to administer, and the route of administration. So we've been leaning in on this supply chain to ensure that when a vaccine is ready to go, we will have the necessary supplies to actually administer it and operationalize the vaccination.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions, but again, the clock's not visible there, so I suspect I've used up my time. I'll submit those in writing.
That was Republican Mike Enzi of Wyoming.
Thank you, Senator Enzi. Senator Sanders.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me thank all of the panelists for the hard work they're doing and for being with us today.
Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of
It is
Vermont.
sad to say that we have a president of the United States, the leader of our country, who from day one downplayed the dangers facing this country from the pandemic, who told us that the crisis would be over in a few months, that we did not have to worry, who fired those members of the government who wanted to act aggressively and, among other things, at a time when we need international cooperation, cut funding for the World Health Organization. But let me also say that I think we understand that facts are terribly important. Not everybody that we don't fully understand all of the ramifications of the COVID-19 epidemic. But let me ask Dr. Fauci a few questions, if I might. For a start, the official statistic, Dr. Fauci, is that 80,000 Americans have died from the pandemic. There are some epidemiologists who suggest the number may be 50% higher than that. What do you think?
I'm not sure, Senator Sanders, if it's going to be 50% higher, but most of us feel that the number of deaths are likely higher than that number because given the situation, particularly in New York City, when they were really strapped with a very serious challenge to their healthcare system, that there may have been people who died at home who did have COVID, who were not counted as COVID because they never really got to the hospital. So in direct answer to your question, I think you are correct that the number is likely higher. I don't know exactly what percent higher, but almost certainly it's higher.
Dr. Fauci, let me ask you this. In the terrible pandemic of 1918, the virus exploded in the fall. It came back with a vengeance. Are we fearful that if we don't get our act together, as bad as the situation is now, it could become worse in the fall or winter?
Well, Senator, thank you for that question. It's a frequently asked question, and I think that possibility does exist. However, and the reason I say that is that when you talk about will this virus just disappear, and as I've said publicly many times, that is just not going to happen because it's such a highly transmissible virus. And even if we get better control over the summer months, it is likely that there will be virus somewhere on this planet that will eventually get back to us. So my approach towards the possibility of a rebound and a second wave in the fall is that A, it's entirely conceivable and possible that it would happen, but B, I would hope that between now and then, given the capability of doing the testing that you've heard from Admiral Jawad and the ability of us to stock up on personal protective equipment and the workforce that the CDC under Dr. Redfield will be putting forth to be able to identify, isolate, and contact trace, I hope that if we do have the threat of a second wave, we will be able to deal with it very effectively to prevent it from becoming an outbreak, not only worse than now, but much, much less.
Okay, well, let me ask, we've heard a lot of discussion about vaccines. Obviously, everybody in Congress and in this country wants a vaccine. We want it as quickly as possible, as effective as possible. Let me ask the Honorable FDA Commissioner, sir, if, God willing, a vaccine is developed, and if we're able to produce it as quickly as we all hope we can, I would imagine that that vaccine would be distributed to all people free of charge, or make sure at least that everybody in America who needs that vaccine will get it, regardless of their income. Is that a fair assumption?
Senator, I certainly hope so. FDA is very committed to making sure that all populations in the United States, including those most vulnerable, are included in the clinical trials. And
well, that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, if and when the vaccine comes, it won't do somebody any good if they don't get it. And if they have to pay a sum of money for it in order to profit the drug companies, that will not be helpful. Are you guaranteeing the American people today that that vaccine will be available to all people, regardless of their income?
Sir, the payment of vaccines is not a responsibility of FDA, but I'm glad to take this back to the task force. I share your concern that this needs to be made available to every American.
Does anybody else want to comment on that? Mr. Jorrell, do you think we should make that vaccine, when hopefully it is created, available to all regardless of income? Or do you think that poor people and working people should be last in line for the vaccine?
I'm sorry, Senator, were you asking me?
Yes, I was, sir. Yes, I was.
No, my office is one of the offices committed to serving the underserved, and we need to be absolutely certain that if a vaccine or an effective therapeutic or preventive is available, that it reaches all segments of society, regardless of their ability to pay or any other social determinants of health that there may be.
That answer so was Assistant Health Secretary Brett Giroir today that regardless of income, every American will be able to gain access to that vaccine when it comes.
They should gain access to it. I don't control, I think
you represent an administration that makes that decision.
I will certainly advocate that everyone is able to receive the vaccine regardless of income or any other circumstance.
Let me just switch gears.
Senator Sanders.
I'm sorry. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Those are important questions. I don't want to cut senators off, and it's hard to see the time clock, but if we could stay as close as possible, 5 minutes, then all senators can get their questions in. Thank you, Senator Sanders. Senator Burr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questioning now turns to Republican Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina. Live coverage of the Senate Health Committee on reopening the economy during the coronavirus pandemic. This is Bloomberg Radio.
At a majority of the press conferences, has anybody in this administration ever asked you or any member to take the foot off the gas of trying to find a cure or any type of countermeasure?
No, Senator, not at all. As a matter of fact, we at NIH, as you know, have been right from the very beginning, put our foot right on that accelerator in every aspect, including the development of vaccines and therapeutics. And as I described in my opening statement, we actually started that in January, literally days after the virus was known and its sequence was published. So no, I have never been told by anyone to pull back on the development of any countermeasure or any basic and clinical research project that we've been involved in.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci. This question is for Dr. Redfield. Dr. Redfield, we have authorized in this committee and appropriated out of Congress multiple times over the last few decades money for biosurveillance, and you talked about it. In the past 4 years, from FY16 to FY20, it's been $23 million a year, and with the CARES Act, it's over $1 billion in biosurveillance. We've seen the private sector go out and use data available to track the progress and spread of coronavirus around the world. Why has CDC not contracted with private sector technology companies to try to use their tools for biosurveillance?
Senator, thank you for the question. This is a critical issue, as you know, and also comes into one of the core capabilities I talked about, data analytics and data monetization, which we're appreciative of the additional funding Congress has given. I can tell you that this is under critical review now. We do have contracts with some of the private sector groups now to try to make the type of availability of data that we've seen with Florida available in all of our jurisdictions across the country, and in the process of making that happen.
With CDC Director Robert Redfield.
June of last year, we reauthorized the pandemic and all hazards legislation, which authorized at that time 30 new billets, 30 new employees at CDC specifically in surveillance. Now, I asked Dr. Shukit in March how many of those 30 had been filled. She said 0. As of mid-April, 0 of those 30 billets had been filled. How many of those 30 employees that this committee authorized CDC to bring on for biosurveillance have been filled today?
Sir, again, thank you for the question. I know our staffs have been in discussion since Dr. Shuckett's testimony, and I know we're in the process of continuing to try to figure out how to move that forward, sir. I can get back to you on it as I discuss what progress has been made since we had that discussion post her hearing with you when you brought that to light.
Well, I brought it to light the 1st of March, and now we're in mid-May. So I'm hopeful that we won't just talk about surveillance, we'll actually execute it, and we'll focus the unbelievable amounts of money that we've provided for you, that they will show some benefit to the American people. Dr. Fauci, let me come back to you. This is one of the fastest development timelines we've ever seen for vaccines. And the American people and hopefully people around the world will be the beneficiary of what you find and the eventual licensure of that product. What are the biggest unknowns with this particular virus that can affect the development process? And Dr. Hahn, if you've got anything to add after that to this, please do. Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, thank you very much, Senator Burr. Well, there are a couple of things that I think are inherent in all vaccine development. First of all, there's no guarantee that the vaccine is actually going to be effective. As you well know, because we've discussed this many times in the past, that you can have everything you think that's in place and you don't induce the kind of immune response that turns out to be protective and durably protective. So one, the big unknown is it will be effective. Given the way the body responds to viruses of this type, I'm cautiously optimistic that we will, with one of the candidates, get an efficacy signal. The other thing that's an unknown, that's of concern, but we'll be able to get around that by doing the tests properly, is that do you get an enhancement effect? Namely, there have been a number of vaccines, 2 in particular, dengue and respiratory syncytial virus, when the vaccine induces a suboptimal response, and when a person gets exposed, they actually have an enhanced pathogenesis of the disease, which is always worrisome. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. Those are the 2 major unknowns. Putting all those things together, Senator Burr, I still feel cautiously optimistic that we will have a candidate that will give some degree of efficacy, hopefully a percentage enough that will induce the kind of herd immunity that would give a protection to the population at home.
Dr. Hahn, anything to add?
It was Dr. Anthony Fauci with
yes,
the
sir.
National
Thanks for the
Institutes of
question.
Health.
The obstacles from a regulatory point of view, I think, are being met by the approach that's being taken out of HHS and led by Peter Marks, and that is a common preclinical development pathway so that we can appropriately assess one vaccine against the other, and then a master protocol that allows for a common control group and an assessment of very common endpoints. That'll let us be as efficient as possible for the development of vaccine. We will evaluate approximately 10 candidates preclinically, and then in the phase 1 and phase 2 studies, and then take 4 to 5 into phase 3 studies in this HHS effort. So I think those are the obstacles that can be broken down to speed the development, but also allow us to ensure safety and effectiveness.
Mr. Chairman, yesterday,
FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn
started to publicize the recovered numbers, those individuals who had coronavirus but have recovered. It's my hope that nationally we will start reporting the recovered numbers. I think that's important for the American people to hear. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Burr. Senator Casey.
Republican Senator Richard Burr wrapping up his questioning, now turning back to the Democrats and Robert Casey of Pennsylvania, the Senate Health Committee hearing on reopening the economy during the coronavirus outbreak. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
In a state like ours, we've had, as you might know, a high number of cases in Pennsylvania. At last count, over 57,000 cases. The number of deaths have gone above 3,700. And of course, a lot of those deaths are in nursing homes. We're told that nationally, more than a third, as high as 35% of all deaths have been in nursing homes, either the death of a resident of a nursing home or a worker. So I'm going to start today with a question for Dr. Redfield. Doctor, when we consider this challenge in our long-term care facilities, when we look at the number of deaths in nursing homes, I think a lot of families want basic transparency, and that's one of the reasons why Senator Wyden and I sent you a letter dated April the 2nd. It was directed to you as well as the administrator of the Centers on Medicare Medicaid Services, Seema Verma. And in that letter, we asked for basic information about what the administration was doing to track the outbreaks in nursing homes, to provide information, basic information, to families and residents, the families of residents in nursing homes, certainly to the workers as well as to the community and public health professionals. Now, it took you over about a month to respond to that, but in your response, you didn't give us any information about the timeline. These families need this information. And now we're told by the CMS administrator, after pressing her, as Senator Wyden and I did, that this information may not be available until the end of May. I need to hear from you today. Why has there been a delay, a 3-month delay in basic information that families and people within a community need about the outbreaks in nursing homes, the number of cases, what is happening in nursing homes? Tell us when we're going to see that information.
Well, thank you very much, Senator. And you've highlighted one of the great tragedies that we've all experienced together. Clearly, the long-term care facilities have been particularly hard hit
this is CDC
by this pandemic. Several things. I know that, again, the CMS, who has oversight, several things have been done, and I can get back to you in terms of where they're at in terms of activation. But clearly, all nursing homes now are required to report cases in either their individuals that are patients there or staff to the CDC. Secondly, I know that FIRMA has put a policy in place that all nursing homes are required to notify their members of that nursing home of the existence of COVID in that nursing home, to include family members. I just verify in terms of when if that's operational as of today or last week, and I will get back to you with that. One of the most important we have decided is we talk about the key in reopening, as Tony mentioned, we need most symptomatic cases, we need to be able to do the contact tracing. But the other thing that we really need to do is to do surveillance, because this virus does appear to have a high propensity for asymptomatic infection, which means our traditional ways of identifying cases is going to be blunted. And so we're developing a national surveillance system, and first and most important in that is to do comprehensive surveillance in all the nursing homes in the United States. CDC will be doing that in partnership with the state and local territorial health departments. I think HRSA is going to have the responsibility to do it within the inner city clinics that are selected, and the Indian Health Service for the Indian Health Service clinics. But this is critical. We get in front of this and do comprehensive surveillance of everybody in these nursing homes. We've also done, aggressive outreach in all of them in enhancing infection control procedures, etc. CDC's been out to help these nursing homes with that into the guidance along with the CMS. But I'll get back to you in terms of the time. I'm pretty confident it's already operational, but I need to double check just to make sure, because I know SEMA has announced that they're all reporting to CDC now any infection in workers or patients, and that they are required now to notify other members in the nursing home as well as family members of them when COVID is in one of those.
And Mr. Chairman, I just have one question for Dr. Fauci. Doctor, I wanted to ask you, in your testimony earlier in response to a question by Senator Murray, you outlined a basic concern you have with regard to states reopening. Can you restate that for us?
Yes. Thank you, Senator Casey. Yes. My concern is that if states or cities or regions, in their attempt, understandable, to get back to some form of normality, disregard to a greater or lesser degree the checkpoints that we put in our guidelines about when it is safe to proceed in pulling back on mitigation. Because I feel if that occurs, there is a real risk that you will trigger an outbreak that you may not be able to control, which in fact, paradoxically, will set you back, not only leading to some suffering and death that could be avoided, but could even set you back on the road to trying to get economic recovery, because it would almost turn the clock back rather than going forward. That is my major concern, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
With the National
Mr. Chairman.
Allergy and
Thank you,
Infectious
Senator
Diseases.
Casey. Senator Paul.
Now the question comes to Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio. The Dow Jones Industrial Average right now is up 57 points. NASDAQ Composite Index is up by 1 point, and the S&P 500 is higher by 27 points.
In addition, an infusion of convalescent plasma is based on the idea that recovering coronavirus patients are developing immunity and that it can be beneficial as donated. Studies show that the recovering COVID-19 patients, from the asymptomatic to the very sick, are showing significant antibody response. Studies show that SARS and MERS, also coronaviruses, induce immunity for at least 2 to 3 years. And yet the media continues to report that we have no evidence that patients who survive coronavirus have immunity. I think actually the truth is the opposite. We have no evidence that survivors of coronavirus don't have immunity, and a great deal of evidence to suggest that they do. The question of immunity is linked to health policy, and that workers who have gained immunity can be a strong part of our economic recovery. The silver lining to so many infections in the meat processing industry is that a large portion of these workers now have immunity. Those workers should be reassured that they likely won't get it again instead of being alarmed by media reports that there is no evidence of immunity. You've stated publicly that you'd bet it all that survivors of coronavirus have some form of immunity. Can you help set the record straight that the scientific record, as it is being accumulated, is supportive that infection with coronavirus likely leads to some form of immunity? Dr. Fauci.
Yep, thank you for the question, Senator Paul. Yes, you're correct that I have said that given what we know about the recovery from viruses such as coronaviruses in general, or even any infectious disease with very few exceptions, that when you have antibody present, it very likely indicates a degree of protection. I think it's in the semantics of how this is expressed when you say, has it been formally proven by long-term natural history studies, which is the only way that you can prove, one, is it protective, which I said and would repeat, is likely that it is, but also, what is the degree or titer of antibody that gives you that critical level of protection, and what is the durability? As I've often said, and again repeat, you can make a reasonable assumption that it would be protective, but natural history studies over a period of months to years will then tell you definitively if that's the case.
And I think that's important because in all likelihood is a good way of putting it. The vast majority of these people have immunity. Instead of saying there is no evidence, the WHO kind of fed into this by saying no evidence of immunity. And in reality, there's every evidence stacking up. And in fact, a lot of the different studies have shown that it is very unlikely that you get it again in the short term. With regard to going back to school, one thing that was left out of that discussion is mortality. I mean, shouldn't we at least be discussing what the mortality of children is? This is for Dr. Fauci as well. The mortality between 0 and 18 in the New York data approaches 0. It's not going to be absolutely 0, but it almost approaches 0. Between 18 and 45, the mortality in New York was 10 out of 100,000. So really, we do need to be thinking about that. We need to observe with an open mind what went on in Sweden, where the kids kept going to school. The mortality per capita in Sweden is actually less than France, less than Italy, less than Spain, less than Belgium, less than the Netherlands, about the same as Switzerland. But basically, I don't think there's anybody arguing that what happened in Sweden is an unacceptable result. I think people are intrigued by it, and we should be. I don't think any of us are certain when we do all these modelings. There have been more people wrong with modeling than right. We're opening up a lot of economies around the U.S., and I hope that people who are predicting doom and gloom and saying, oh, we can't do this, there's going to be a surge, will admit that they were wrong if there isn't a surge, because I think that's what's going to happen. In rural states, we never really reached any sort of pandemic levels in Kentucky and other states. We have less deaths in Kentucky than we have in an average flu season. It's not to say this isn't deadly, but really outside of New England, we've had a relatively benign course for this virus nationwide. And I think the one-size-fits-all that we're going to have a national strategy and nobody's going to go to school is kind of ridiculous. We really ought to be doing it school district by school district, and the power needs to be dispersed because people make wrong predictions. And really the history of this, when we look back, will be of wrong prediction after wrong prediction after wrong prediction, starting with Ferguson in England. So I think we ought to have a little bit of humility in our belief that we know what's best for the economy. And as much as I respect you, Dr. Fauci, I don't think you're the end all. I don't think you're the one person that gets to make a decision. We can listen to your advice, but there are people on the other side saying there's not going to be a surge and that we can safely open the economy, and the facts will bear this out. But if we keep kids out of school for another year, what's going to happen is the poor and underprivileged kids who don't have a parent that's able to teach them at home are not going to learn for a full year. And I think we ought to look at the Swedish model, and we ought to look at letting our kids get back to school. I think it's a huge mistake if we don't open the schools in the fall. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to that even though there are only 32 seconds left?
Yes, and you might make it clear whether or not you suggested that we shouldn't go back to school in the fall.
Well, first of all, Senator Paul, thank you for your comments. I have never made myself out to be the end-all and only voice in this. I'm a scientist, a physician, and a public health official. I give advice according to the best scientific evidence. There are a number of other people who come into that and give advice that are more related to the things that you spoke about the need to get the country back open again and economically. I don't give advice about economic things. I don't give advice about anything other than public health. So I wanted to respond to that. The second thing is that you use the word we should be humble about what we don't know. And I think that falls under the fact that we don't know everything about this virus. And we really better be very careful, particularly when it comes to children, because the more and more we learn, we're seeing things about what this virus can do that we didn't see from the studies in China or in Europe. For example, right now, children presenting with COVID-19 who actually have a very strange inflammatory syndrome, very similar to Kawasaki's syndrome. I think we better be careful if we are not cavalier in thinking that children are completely immune to the deleterious effects. So again, you're right in the numbers that children in general do much, much better than adults and the elderly, and particularly those with underlying conditions. But I am very careful and hopefully humble in knowing that I don't know everything about this disease, and that's why I'm very reserved in making broad predictions. Thank you.
Dr. Anthony Fauci with the National Institutes of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Murray and our witnesses. I want to try to cover a lot of territory in my 5 minutes, so I'd certainly be appreciative of concise answers. But I want to start with Dr. Redfield.
This is Democrat Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin.
I think that the current testing protocols at the White House presents a model for other essential workplaces.
I'm sorry, Senator, you broke up at the beginning of your question. If you could just say it again, I'm sorry.
Yes. Dr. Redfield, do you think that the testing protocols currently in place in the White House present a model for other essential workplaces?
Well, I think, thank you for the question. I think one of the important things you bring up is the essential worker guidance that CDC put out. And I think it was originally modeled, obviously, on healthcare workers, where there were significant healthcare shortages in individuals that were...
In many workplaces, I'm asking you if you think that the White House protocols for testing are a model for other essential workplaces.
The question to CDC Director Robert Redfield.
I would just say that I think each workplace has to define their own approach to how to operationalize our...
I already had some considerable comment on the fact that OSHA has not stood up an enforceable mandatory emergency temporary standard for workers in all sorts of work settings. But that aside, would you say that the PPE rules and protocols in effect right now in the White House are a model for other essential workplaces?
We would, in my own view, it would go back to the guidelines that CDC has put out about essential workplaces for people. If they are an essential workforce, that they go in public, they maintain 6 feet distancing, and they wear face coverings.
Okay. Admiral Jawar, you have testified about how far you've come with regard to testing assessments. I want to ask you if you believe that we already have a national testing strategy today that spans from the nationwide testing needs assessment to the nationwide testing supply assessment, and a strategy to fill that gap, to procure domestically what we need in terms of bridging that gap with testing platforms, swabs, specimen collection media, and reagents, and the PPE needed to conduct those tests.
So thank you for that. We do have a strategy that spans us at least to the fall and beyond. As I mentioned, we're working individually with every state, and I think Senator Paul is correct that Kentucky, Wyoming, or New Jersey, Rhode Island are different, and there are vastly different testing needs. The East Coast will have multiples of testing versus other states, and we're working those individually.
So I know you testified earlier that not only are you working with the states, but you're working with every lab in every state to increase capacity. What about working with those who would be those who would need testing to, say, reopen their school, their university, their business? Each of them have identified what they think are their testing needs based on, guidance, not mandatory enforceable rules. But are you in contact at that level? Is your dashboard have visibility at that lowest level, or are you mostly in contact with the states and with the labs?
So over the last few months, we've done a lot of the individual work at nursing homes, at meatpacking plants, really down to the very granular level.
Okay.
Where we are right now, however, is we are really working with the state leadership, with the public health lab, the state epidemiologists, the shows, the state health officials, because they really need to understand what their sum is going to be in their state.
Okay.
And then in the funding, we're asking very specifically in the CDC funding for specific plans for schools, nursing homes, underserved, et cetera.
So I have two more points that I'm going to make. I don't have time for questions. One is about the transparency of that needs assessment. Can the public see it? Can the state see it? Can the HELP committee members see it? Is it publicly available? And secondly, the delivery of this supply is a critical issue. And it seems to me that the logistics for getting this out, whether it's PPE, testing, or medical equipment, is still extremely fragmented, leading to price gouging and many other inefficiencies. We need to stand up the full power of the Defense Production Act.
Democrat Tammy Baldwin wrapping up her questions.
Sorry. I'm happy to have you comment with the indulgence of the chairman. We've gone over time, and
why don't you try to give us a succinct answer to the senator, please, Admiral Giroir.
Yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. Particularly for things like swabs and media, there is still a very, I would say, non-mature industry within the country, and that's why we've made the decision to procure that all centrally through December, and then distribute that to the state, because there are just too many small companies, too many variables to control without a really heavy federal hand. That's just an example of where we really moved into that and used the DPA for swabs to help support American industry. In more mature aspects of the industry, like some of the large test producers, we feel that by helping direct them to make sure that the states get what they need in the right distribution, that we're not procuring them directly by us. But again, we're going to be very evidence and data driven as we move on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much,
Secretary
Senator
Brett Giroir.
Senator Collins.
Questioning now turns to Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine.
Let me begin by first thanking each of our witnesses today for their expertise, their dedication, and their hard work. Dr. Redfield, I want to start with you. I am hearing from dentists all over the state of Maine that the fact that they cannot practice in our state, despite following very strict infection control protocols, is causing growing health problems. Dentists tell me that teeth with cavities that could have been filled are now going to need root canals. Teeth that could have been treated with root canals are now going to require extractions. People with oral cancers cannot get the treatment, the cleanings that they need before beginning their treatment. Dental health is clearly so important, and Maine state officials, as well as our dentists, are seeking assistance in reaching the right decisions. 47 other states either have reopened dental practices or have a date set for them to reopen. So my question to you is this. If dentists are following the American Dental Association guidelines, if they're instituting strict protective measures for their patients, their staffs, their hygienists, themselves, and if they're closely examining and seeing a decline in the number of COVID-19 infections in their county, Are these reasonable factors for states to consider in reopening the practice of dentistry?
Yes, Senator, thank you for the question. We've been interacting and talking with dentists and working with the state and local public health officials to update our guidelines on reopening a variety of medical services, as you know. And I think you raise a very important point, and I would not disagree with what you said about looking at the American Dental Associations as well as the reality of the outbreak in the area. But we are in the process of updating those guidelines, and they will include direct guidelines for dental practices.
CDC Thank Director you very Robert much, Doctor. Dr. Jura and Dr. Hahn, recently there's been a significant demand for remdesivir, I may be mispronouncing it, which transitioned to receiving an emergency use authorization. Last week, Maine's two largest hospital systems contacted me with questions about how this therapeutic will be allocated going forward. HHS finally released a statement on Saturday about allocations going to states, interestingly, not directly to hospitals. But once again, the decision-making behind these allocations is very unclear. HHS and the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response say that each state is expected to receive an allocation, but no timetable has been provided. Beyond those who are being treated with this drug at Maine Medical Center through a clinical trial, I'm concerned that hospitalized patients in Maine will have little or no ability to be treated with this promising therapeutic for the foreseeable future. As this and more therapeutics and ultimately a vaccine come onto the marketplace, how can these allocation and distribution issues be resolved so that patient care is not delayed and so that it doesn't depend on which state you live in whether or not you're going to get access to these treatments and ultimately a vaccine?
Senator Collins, go ahead, Admiral Joa.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Senator Collins, I think we completely agree with you that this has to be an evidence-based approach, getting the medical therapeutics, vaccines, remdesivir, whichever it happens to be, to the people in need. I think we can all agree upon the fact that we learned a lot of lessons from the remdesivir situation. And of course, as you mentioned, that's being led by HHS and ASPR. What you've seen in the most recent announcement is that what the task force did was provide guidance to HHS regarding where the most significant outbreak occurred and where those hospitalized patients were. This represented about a quarter of the supply of drug that we have, and more will be allocated according to the methodology that gets drug to where those hospitalized patients are. I think valuable lessons can be learned and will be learned with respect to other therapies and to vaccines in particular, and we must incorporate those into our operational plans moving forward.
Thank you,
Commissioner
Doctor.
Stephen Hahn.
Admiral, do you have anything to add? I'm over time, sorry. Thank you. If you have anything to add, if you do so for the record.
No, ma'am. I agree with the Commissioner. It's absolutely critical that it's evidence-based, based on the people who could benefit from it, and also fair and just throughout our country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Collins. And Senator Murphy,
This is Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut beginning his questioning. Live coverage of the Senate Health Committee on reopening the coronavirus and reopening the economy during the coronavirus outbreak. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
Are in quarantine, and so I just want to start by asking a pretty simple yes or no question that I think I know the answer to. Dr. Fauci, Dr. Hahn, and Dr. Redfield, I'm correct that all of you are drawing a salary, as you should, during your period of quarantine. Is that correct?
Senator, let me start off. I think we better be careful about the issue of quarantine. We are essential workers as part of the essential infrastructure, and we are, when needed, which is often, do our duties in our respective places at the White House. I was at the White House yesterday, and I will likely perhaps even be there today, and in my office at the NIH. So it is not really, strictly speaking, the quarantine as we know it, but it is performing our duties as critical workers. And I'd be happy to have my colleagues also respond to that.
Senator Murphy, this is Steve Hahn. I agree with Dr. Fauci, and yes, I am drawing a salary, and I have continued to work during my quarantine, and as an essential worker, will participate in meetings face-to-face when that attendance is considered critical.
My point here, listen, you all should draw a salary while you are taking precautionary steps because of the contacts you have made. My point is that quarantine is relatively easy for people like you and me. We can still work and get paid, we can telework, but there are millions of other Americans who work jobs that can't be performed from home or are paid by the hour. And it's just remarkable to me that this administration has not yet developed a mechanism for states to implement and pay for a quarantine system that will work for all Americans. Your plan to reopen America requires states develop that plan, and yet my state has no clue how to implement and pay for that system without help from the federal government. Which leads me to my second question. Dr. Fauci and Dr. Redfield, you've made news today by warning us appropriately of the dangers of states opening too early. But as Senator Murray mentioned, this is infuriating to many of us because it comes hours after the president declared that we have prevailed over coronavirus, which I'm just going to tell you is going to make it much harder on state leaders to keep social distancing restrictions in place. It comes days after the president called on citizens to liberate their states from social distancing orders. And I think you're all noble public servants, but I worry that you're trying to have it both ways. You say this state shouldn't open too early, but then you don't give us the resources to succeed. You work for a president who is frankly undermining our efforts to comply with the guidance that you've given us. And then the guidance that you have provided is criminally vague. And I want to ask my last question on this topic. Obviously, the plan to reopen America was meant to be followed by more detailed, nuanced guidance, right? What does a downward trajectory mean? What happens if the trajectory is downward in some settings but upward in others? What happens if you reopen and then there's a spike in one location or another setting? And of course, you knew this because you developed this guidance, this additional guidance that is site-specific, that frankly is helpful. Some of this is on the CDC website, but some of it is not. And we need it. My state needs it. We don't have all of the experts that you have, and so we rely on you. So reporting suggests, Dr. Redfield, that this guidance that was developed by you and other experts was shelved by the administration, that it was
all right, we're listening to live coverage of the Senate Health Committee, the Health Committee holding a hearing on opening up the economy during the coronavirus outbreak. We've been listening to questioning there and a statement from Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who in a lot of ways has been encapsulating some of the issues surrounding the idea of reopening the economy during the outbreak, the need for continued testing. We've heard from Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the Centers for Disease Control, Robert Redfield, and other witnesses, all reiterating the need for continued ramp up of testing. And also Lisa and Paul noting that, there is a risk as we think about opening during an outbreak that we could see spikes in infection in certain places, and there's a need to be humble as we potentially foresee this idea.
Nathan Hager, thank you so much for that. And Paul, I got to say, one thing that really struck me as I was listening to that, unlikely that we're going to have a vaccine by fall, likely that as we reopen, we could see resurgences in viruses.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, what does this mean for the reopening of schools? What does this mean in terms of the reopening of some of the more densely populated areas? I don't know. And, to the degree that people are saying that they hope that the Florida experiment is going to be successful, I think we all do, right? I mean, we all want to see a successful reopening right now.
Yeah, we do. And I think it might just be regional, as one of the senators was suggesting. There's certain areas of the country that just won't be able to, they won't be on the same time schedule. And so there's, it might be a regional solution, a regional response, and maybe even down to individual states as well, maybe individual cities. So, but certainly one of the key issues as we think about reopening this economy and all of what that really means.
Yeah, coming up, they're going to dig deeper into the response by Washington, D.C. with respect to additional stimulus. I don't want to say stimulus. Rescue financing is probably more like it at this point. We're going to drive forward that conversation with Bloomberg's Balance of Power with David West. And I'm Lisa Abramowitz, along with Paul Sweeney. Markets bouncing between gains and losses, trying to find a direction on a day of some bleak medical outlook. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. Interconnect.
Did somebody say just eat?
Me, get delivery like a G. See, hungry dogs gotta eat. I get mines every day, every week. Chicken wings to the crib, I'm sitting in. Burger in the low. Hope they put the pickle in. Wonton on a catamaran. Oodles and noodles, thank you, my man. J-U-S-T-E-A-T.
Somebody say, just eat.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16+. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
For more than 20 years, Asda supported our communities. We've raised over £23 million for Fair Share and the Trussell Trust. And recently, we've donated supplies to frontline NHS workers and carers. We've always been proud to serve those around us. Visit asda.com/creating change for better. Asda, we're all in this together.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
from New York to our Bloomberg TV and radio audiences worldwide. Welcome to Balance of Power. This is where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. We're going to start again today with the markets and get an check on those from Abigail Doolittle. Abigail, what's going on?
It's pretty anemic on the surface, David. Very small moves fluctuating between declines and gains for the major averages. Beneath the surface, though, there's lots of action. So let's take a look at what is happening beneath the surface. And from a sector perspective, yesterday we were talking about the financials lagging. That's the case once again today. This could be worrisome because this sector on the year, David, is in a bear market. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not the rally that we've had out of the March lows can continue without this key sector on board. Where we do have lots of green, though, for that biotech sector. Once again, the NASDAQ Biotech Index up 1.4%. And one of the big winners there, Novavax, they have received, or they're going to be able to receive, up to close to $400 million to pursue one of their vaccine treatments. It's fascinating, though, because the stock up 67% at the highs, up 74%. At that point, on pace for its best day since 2009, all on the hope that they maybe will come up with a vaccine. And then the actual timeline toward it could take so much longer. But markets are just so excited for the possibility that a vaccine against this virus may be developed soon.
Yeah, it's not just the markets. I think all are excited if there's, in fact, a vaccine. In the meantime, we've been hearing from Dr. Fauci today from the NIH talking about exactly the prospects of reopening, what the risks are there. Are the markets reacting to what he's saying up on the Hill?
Not all that much, but his remarks are a little bit more cautious, saying it's very unlikely, as we have been talking about, that a vaccine will be available this fall. The idea of herd immunity, not really a lot of positive commentary there. So we have, again, seen the major averages fluctuate slightly, so not a huge reaction, but I would say that there is some caution there. One of the big pieces of news on the day, though, David, that we have been talking about to some degree, and especially yesterday, the issuance, bond issuance. So a piece of this has been on the idea that the Fed is going to step in and buy some of these credit ETFs. Well, lo and behold, today is the day where they start that LQD, the investment grade bond ETF, up more than 20% from the March low, more recently stalling ahead of the Fed actually buying. But today, again, they are actually entering that market. We don't know if it's LQD, HYG, what credit ETFs in particular. We just know that they're entering this market. So this ETF is up 1%. So we have some Fed support there. And of course, that does seem to be one of the big underpinnings for this risk rally that we have had out of the March lows, David.
Yeah, everybody's going to be focused on what the Fed is doing. Thank you so much to Abigail Doolittle for that report on the markets. Well, governments, state governments particularly, are starting to open up their economies, but they're not going fast enough for at least some people, including Elon Musk. Elon Musk has reopened his factory in California, even though county authorities told him not to do it, and he essentially dared them to come arrest him in the factory. We welcome now Congressman from California for 18 years, Darrell Issa. He also is a small businessman, actually built into quite a big business over the course of his career, and we welcome Congressman Issa now back to Bloomberg. So, Congressman Issa, take the Elon Musk instance specifically. What does that tell us more generally about opening up the economy, at least in California?
Well, what it tells you is that we really closed the economy based on a statement that if we didn't close major portions, if you will, other than the essential portions of the economy, that we were going to get swamped in our hospitals. Elon Musk is somebody with an IQ that is higher than the rest of the people in the room. He's looking and saying, well, that arithmetic never happened. We're at 18% capacity in our hospitals, and there's an inherent unfairness that auto manufacturers in states that are allowing them to open are basically going to be selling cars. Well, he has none. But also that in California, if, let's say, you're a defense contractor down here in San Diego, the people that make the Predator aircraft, they, by definition, never closed because they were essential. But from a healthcare standpoint, there's really no difference between an aluminum assembly line for the Tesla and the aluminum assembly line for an aircraft.
So, Congressman, I said, we all want to get the economy going again. At the same time, we don't want to go so far and so fast as to have some flare-ups again. Is California, in your estimation, ready on the testing front, ready on the excess surge capacity for hospitals, so that if, in fact, there are some hot spots that develop, you can deal with them?
Again, we're sitting at 18% of capacity in our hospitals. More than half of our medical workforce has been laid off. The reality is we never even got to half of what New York State got, and we never got to a quarter of what New York City got to. In other words, the premise for shutting down should have been, or let's say moderating how many people got to work, should have been based on healthcare capacity, because that's what we were told it was. We overshot the healthcare capacity savings by 5 or 10-fold. And you mentioned just before I came on the whole question of, let's say, us versus Sweden. If we succeed the way it looks like we're succeeding, are going to have almost no herd immunity. Fall is going to come. We're going to be in a situation where we've essentially infected too few young people, no herd immunity, not yet a vaccine, and potentially be asked to do the same thing again. If you're the man that essentially created PayPal, created a new generation of launch vehicles, and created this new car, you think differently, more three-dimensionally than most people, and by the way, more boldly than any other CEO. And that's what's really happened with Elon Musk, is he's looked and said, the courts will take years to tell us what rights we have. I only know that this is a wrong. And he's made a pretty bold statement. And this isn't a man who inherently doesn't like the governor, or for that matter is a partisan. This is somebody who simply did the arithmetic and said, this makes no sense.
Congressman, as I said, you founded your own business long before you went to the Congress. So you know the plight of developing a business, building one, building it up. Give us a sense of how small businessmen in your area of California are doing right now. Has the government done enough to help them?
Well, if the government pays you for 2 months of being idle, then in fact, in a sense, they've done what they can do. The problem is that 2 months of being idle is coming to an end. And to be candid, I'm going to speak a little ill of the program, the PPP program, for a moment. It didn't differentiate between those who are decimated, let's just say a sit-down restaurant, or some other small store that's been completely shuttered. It didn't differentiate between that and somebody who's still open. And that's one of the challenges, is we've distorted an economy in a way that, as a small businessman of a few $100 million in sales, I've never seen anything this stupid. We paid the same amount for somebody whose people were going to work every day as somebody who was shuttered by an executive order. So you want to talk about a distortion? We have created a distortion in the market that we will be generations writing about and trying to figure out how to unwind. The bottom line is, if today you were to go out to the store, and let's say you go to a Costco, and as long as you're there, you want to buy a T-shirt, or for that matter, a surfboard, in San Diego or in Riverside or anywhere, you can do that. You can buy that. But just try to find one at thousands of other small businesses that compete for T-shirts and surfboards and other items. They're shuttered. So undoing this distortion in a acceptable way, and I think it's important that we stop thinking that we're going to prevent the disease and go back to the original concept, which is we're going to protect the elderly and the infirmed, and we're going to make sure that we don't swamp the capability of our healthcare providers, which is very different than what Governor Newsom and Governor Cuomo and others are saying. They're issuing we have to have no deaths. People will die in San Diego County from the flu in the same month that you're demanding that no one die from COVID-19. I'm not saying that they're the same. What I'm saying is that from a pure business standpoint, our economy needs to generate that $22 trillion that makes us successful. Every month we generate dramatically less, in this case, $10 trillion less effectively. Any month that occurs is a month in which we're losing $10 trillion that could be applied to all kinds of things, including all those miracle cures that we're still looking for, including this vaccine.
Okay, thank you so very much for joining us today. That is Congressman Darrell Issa of California. Coming up here, restaurant chains are trying to get back to work themselves. The question is, how are they going to do that? We're going to talk with a man who is responsible for some 15,000 restaurants around the country, including Popeyes and Burger King. He's Jose Sill. He's the CEO of Restaurant Brands International. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
Sick of this. We're gonna do this doggy style.
Did somebody say just eat?
Me, get delivery like a G. See, hungry dogs gotta eat. I get mines every day, every week. Chicken wings to the crib, I'm sitting in. Burger in the low. Hope they put the pickle in. Wonton on a catamaran. Oodles and noodles, thank you, my man. Tacos to the chateau. Please, did somebody say
just eat?
Private jetting in the night sky. My man hand glide by with my fried rice. Right? What could you not love? Bought a slice on the side of the hot tub. Ooh, what you gon' do, boo? Chocolate fondue right on cue. Even dipping in the sea. I see food, seafood sees me. J-U-S-T-E-A-T.
Somebody say just eat.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling.
It's not impossible.
Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
For more than 20 years, Asda supported our communities. We've raised over £23 million for Fair Share and the Trussell Trust. And recently, we've donated supplies to frontline NHS workers and carers. We've always been proud to serve those around us. Visit asda.com/creating change for better. Asda, we're all in this together.
TSB believe in people helping people. So if you need a repayment holiday on your TSB mortgage, loan or credit card, get in touch and TSB will do what they can to help. To apply, go to tsb.co.uk. Interest will continue to apply and you will pay more interest overall. Terms and conditions apply.
Pauline. Love may be blind, but it has a new smell.
Pauline, the new fragrance from Euro Millions winner Pauline Hinchcliffe. Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £55 million. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
But in the end, in the restaurant business, David, I think some things will ring true. They always have and always will. I think people will always want great tasting food or beverages. People will always want convenience, and people will always want to trust the brands that they visit and solicit. And so we think with all the steps we've taken over the last 10, 12 weeks and the great work that our franchisees as well as our team members have done, we think we're really well positioned because of our product, our technology, our safety measures, all focused on the guest. I think we're really well positioned to win and to win long term, and that's the focus for us in this new normal.
Jose, to what extent does your business now depend on things like Uber Eats and Grubhub? By the way, Dow Jones is reporting that maybe Grubhub and Uber Eats are in the process of negotiating perhaps a merger. How does that affect your business?
So we've been rolling out delivery in North America for quite some time, and we've accelerated that rollout with, especially in Canada, with thousands of restaurants onboarding the different aggregators that are available in Canada. In the U.S., we have many restaurants with Burger King and Popeyes and Tim Hortons using multiple aggregators, third-party delivery companies, Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats, as well as Postmates. And we also have, we've enabled over the last, since the end of 2019, we've enabled what we call our white label for delivery on our own app, which is increasingly growing as an important part of our delivery business. So we've been working with many of them and all of the key providers, and we think that having access to delivery through the multiple aggregators and as well as our own native apps will give consumers and guests opportunities to enjoy our great products and beverages from our great brands any way they want, at any time that they want it.
Jose, we hear a lot about supply chain right now, particularly when it comes to meat. Should we be worried about whether there's going to be meat available from your stores on, for example, July 4?
Now, we have an amazing group of suppliers that we've been working with for decades at Burger King, and the same for Tim Hortons and Popeyes for all the proteins that we serve. We've got safety measures in place for stock and inventory. We work very closely all the way back to the raw material suppliers, and we're working closely with them during this difficult moment. And we feel confident in our supply chain. We feel confident in the quality of our product and in our ability to deliver it every day to our consumers across the country and across North America.
Jose, you have a presence in China. Talk to us about what you've learned from the experience in China. And for that matter, are you thinking of maybe expanding over there? Luckin is having some difficulty in coffee. Are you going to open a bunch of Tim Hortons coffee shops?
Yeah, we've been in China for quite some time. We have over 1,300 restaurants with Burger King. We started to develop Tim Hortons in China in 2019 and had a very strong start last year and look forward to a really fast growth trajectory in China for the coffee business, which is, we think, one of the more exciting markets for coffee around the world, in addition to the U.S. and Canada. And then Popeyes is about to open its first restaurant in China in the coming days. By the end of the week or early next week. It's a beautiful store in Shanghai. So we believe long term in that market. We think it's an incredible market where fast food and quick service brands like ours in a segment like burgers, chicken, and coffee that are fast growing in that market will do quite well over time. We learned a lot from our experience with COVID-19 in China. The teams at Burger King and Tim Hortons in China that were already operating restaurants did an incredible job, along with our franchisee, along with our teams as well, to build procedures, contactless procedures, enhanced safety, temperature checks at the restaurants with infrared thermometers were things that we learned
here in North America from our partners in China, and we implemented quickly here. We were one of the first companies and brands to do so in North America. Their experience has been tremendous, and their partnership and innovation and creativity has helped us be able to tackle the crisis in a proactive and optimistic way, and that's something we bring to the table across all of our brands in all of our markets around the world.
Right. Jose, I'm going to end with one quick one from a viewer who's been listening to you and has a question for you at your dividend policy. You're changing your dividend policy given the pandemic.
Yeah, we just had earnings a couple of weeks ago, and we were happy to report that our balance sheet is strong. We drew down on our revolver as well as went out on a bond deal, and we've got a strong and very healthy balance sheet that we feel very confident in. But we also are working closely with our franchisees to ensure that they have the right liquidity in the near and midterm in a difficult moment. And we shared as part of our earnings release and communications that the dividend continues at RBI.
Okay, thank you so much, Jose. Really appreciate it. We covered a lot of ground there. That is Jose Sill. He is the CEO of Restaurant Brands International. And now it's time for Bloomberg First Word News. For that, we go to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. America's top infectious disease expert is warning against reopening the economy too soon. Dr. Anthony Fauci told a Senate panel today that doing so would risk new coronavirus outbreaks. Dr. Fauci also told the Senate Health Committee there are at least 8 potential vaccines being developed, and he warned against being cavalier about the risk of the virus and what it poses to children. The UK is extending its furlough program through October. The government's paying the wages of 7.5 million workers to protect their jobs. Some workers will return to their jobs part-time. Employers and the government will split salary payments. Spain is seeing its number of coronavirus cases and deaths increase. The country has been slowly easing its lockdown restrictions after more than 8 weeks of confinement. 176 people died in Spain in the past 24 hours. That brings the country's total death toll to nearly 27,000. Spain has had more than 229,000 coronavirus infections. A spokesman for Russian President Vladimir Putin has become the latest top official to become infected with the coronavirus. Dmitry Peskov tells Russian media he's been hospitalized and is receiving treatment for the illness. The country's prime minister and transport and culture ministers have also been sickened. Peskov says he last saw President Putin in person more than a month ago. Russia has more than 232,000 cases of coronavirus, second only to the United States. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. Well, coming up here, we're going to get a chance to talk to the Energy Secretary. He is Dan Brouillette about U.S. energy policy. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Whether it's another day of market misery, pandemic emergency, or both, one thing will still go right.
We have the latest world and national news.
Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager bring you the most accurate coverage.
The White House is looking for additional ways to support the economy.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
We continue to watch equities around the world.
Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balanced Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It's time now for Stock of the Hour, and it's Simon Property, which is up nicely today as they came out and said they're going to be relatively aggressive in opening up their centers. And for a report, we turn now to Abigail Doolittle. Abigail?
David, it's been an interesting day because at the high, Simon Property Group actually up 9%, and it's counterintuitive only because they missed both top and bottom line estimates. But the selling point, or what had been positive, is what you were talking about, the idea that they are reopening malls. But that's about it. Not a lot of transparency. They did not give detail on rent that was collected both in March and April. They also talked about the idea that they're delaying the dividend. They will not cut it by more than 50%. But again, not a lot of positive information there. So investors, traders, really just excited by the fact that you have the country's largest publicly traded mall REIT, the fact that they are reopening their properties. At the time of the call, I believe it was 89 of a total of 178, and they plan to open all of those, David.
So, Abigail, not a lot of transparency there. What about that big Taubman deal? Did they talk about that?
Not really. That's another thing. Not a lot of information coming out of this call, but what could be the idea, I was speaking with Lindsay Dutch, one of our REIT analysts here at Bloomberg, and her sense is they will go through with it, maybe at a discount, so that could be a piece of the excitement. To the flip side, or the downside, though, I was just mentioning how they plan on delaying that dividend. It's interesting only because they're talking about delaying it to June. Not a lot of color that they have there, really waiting for more information to see how much they will cut it. But given the stock is down so much this year, investors earlier had been happy. Now just about flat, David.
Thank you so much to Abigail Doolittle. And this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are fluctuating after Dr. Anthony Fauci told Congress that reopening the economy too soon will cause a spike in coronavirus outbreaks. Uber is very serious about food delivery, so serious that sources tell Bloomberg it's made an offer to buy Grubhub. The companies are talking about a deal and could reach an agreement as soon as this month. The cost of living dropped in April by the most since the last recession. However, the price of food surged the most since 1974, with record increases for the price of bread, chicken, soda, and snacks. And a lobbying group for small business owners finds they're more pessimistic about their sales outlook than they've been in decades. On Wall Street, the Dow is up 20 points, NASDAQ up 17, S&P 500 falling 3. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In these times of loss and crisis, the people you trust to ask the questions you need answered become even more vital.
Should the president, though, impose the Defense Production Act?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Help us understand what we know so far.
Bloomberg Business Week.
They are on the front line of the impact of the coronavirus.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Well, Saudi Arabia this week cut its oil production, and President Trump just today tweeted out his praise for that, saying, among other things, that the oil companies in the United States are starting to look very good again. Welcome now the Secretary of the Department of Energy. He is Dan Barrett. So thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for joining us. Give us a sense of how it looks from your point of view. We were very concerned about the oil industry only a week or two ago. Is it looking better now?
Well, first, thanks, David, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity today. And yes, it is starting to look really good. As the president tweeted out this morning, and as he's been saying for quite some time now, we're on the verge of a transition to greatness, and we're starting to see it. We now have 23 states that are opening up. There are local economies that represents roughly 40% of the gasoline demand in the United States. We're starting to see oil prices stabilize. I think it's very important to note that, this increase is good for consumers in the sense that jobs are protected all across the economy, and we've seen no dramatic impact on gasoline prices across the country, which I think is very important as well.
So, Mr. Secretary, take us behind the scenes a little bit if you can. We know that President Trump has a very good relationship with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. Was that cut at all something that the president helped encourage or even arrange?
The presidents have been personally engaged in this conversation for the last few weeks. As we talked about in the past, OPEC began its conversations around the early March timeframe, and Saudi Arabia and Russia got themselves into a bit of a dispute over their production numbers. And when the Saudis decided to take some actions right at the beginning of this pandemic, that led to both increased production and a reduction in the pricing of oil across the world. It impacted the U.S. producers very dramatically, and the president saw that early. He engaged with the heads of state in both countries, both Russia. He's talked to President Putin several times, and he's also engaged personally with the King of Saudi Arabia. The point of those conversations is to bring stability to the marketplace and stability to the producing community, and that's really our goal here.
Is there any risk that actually the U.S. production may come back too far, too fast? I mean, I just read there's Energy Transfer LP came out and said that at least in the Permian Basin, that actually shale's coming back quite fast. It went down about 8%, and now a full quarter of that is back online. Are you at all concerned that that might undermine some of the efforts here to stabilize the oil price?
No, I don't think so, David. I think what we're going to see here very shortly, if you're familiar with our Energy Information Administration, what we refer to as EIA, they just put out a report about an hour or so ago that talks about the economic boom that I think we're just on the verge of seeing. So the third and fourth quarters in 20 and certainly into 21 are going to be very, very robust. So the production will come back online as this economy begins to take off. And if you look at those numbers, I think you'll see that what the president has referred to as a V-shaped recovery looks very clear in the charts right now. So you'll see the production tend to match that V-shaped curve.
So, Mr. Secretary, it wasn't that long ago we were talking about what kinds of accommodations you needed to make. The president designated you, along with Secretary Mnuchin, to really help out the U.S. oil industry. And you were talking about certain things like lending facilities. We also have the Fed now doing that as well, changing their rules. Do we need that support anymore, or is that taken care of pretty much?
Well, it's a little early to tell, and it varies company by company. But what the Secretary directed both Secretary Mnuchin and myself to do was to evaluate the programs that were passed by the Congress and ensure that there is access for these energy industries to those programs. And that's what we've done. Secretary Mnuchin worked very closely with the Federal Reserve. We adjusted the program, the Main Street Lending Program, and made that program available to what we refer to as mid-cap size companies. There are companies in America that are investment grade. They perhaps do not need the same level of economic help that others do in the marketplace, and they have access to capital and access to liquidity perhaps others don't have. But there are many companies out there that simply didn't have that option. So making available this program that was passed by Congress was very, very important. And I applaud Secretary Mnuchin, the Federal Reserve, and others for moving so aggressively to do exactly that.
So, Mr. Secretary, when you implement a program like that, how do you deal with what a lot of people call moral hazard? As you said, the investor-grade companies don't really need it so much. Others do because they're not in nearly as good shape. But sometimes that's because they've, let's be frank, borrowed too much. This tends to be a bit of a boom and bust business, as I understand it, in the oil patch. How do you make sure that we're not encouraging almost reckless behavior when it comes to financing?
That's absolutely correct, David. I mean, there's no question that moral hazard exists. It exists in every form of the banking industry. So, when we apply these types of, or we create these types of programs, we apply very strict lending standards to them. And what Secretary Mnuchin and I did was to identify those companies that really were impacted by COVID. I mean, but for the COVID pandemic, they would be strong, ongoing concerns. And we looked at those companies for potentially making loans available to them. We did, we're very, very clear and very strict about this. There are some companies that were on the verge of insolvency, and they were highly leveraged and were perhaps not going to make it under any circumstance. Those companies are going to be excluded from these types of programs, and I think rightfully so.
So let's talk about another restriction that, as I understand, you've put into place, and that is on imports of power grid equipment from adversaries. It's taken, and I'm not saying this, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it's taken by many to really refer to China. It raises the larger question about supply chains around the world that a lot of people are asking right now. What was the threat that you saw, the risk that you saw that required that restriction?
Sure. So what happened, David, the president issued an executive order about a week or so ago now. What we've identified are certain threats within our bulk, what we refer to as the bulk power electric grid. It's the pieces or the components that make up the electric grid that provide the enormous amounts of electricity that keep the lights on in our major cities. And what we have seen is that the supply chains have moved from the United States to other parts of the world, and in certain cases to parts of the world that candidly don't have our interest at heart, and they're adversarial countries. And what we began to see is the imposition of certain types of technology into some of these components that make up the grid that would allow data transfer. It would allow manipulation of the grid in certain cases, and that's very, very concerning for us because if you think about where we are today in this pandemic, if someone who was not aligned with our goals in the United States, who again didn't have our interest at heart, decided to turn the lights off in New York City, then those hospitals go dark. And that's a very, very concerning situation for us. So the president rightfully recognized this. We have begun the process of evaluating the grid. We'll be working with the industry players, both at the governmental level as well as the private industry level, to identify these pieces of equipment, and we will inform them as to what we find.
Are we confident that there are U.S. or other, I guess I would say, friendly sources that can replace that equipment? Or is some of this equipment we need to get from countries that, as you put it, don't necessarily have our interests at heart?
Yeah, we do have the capabilities of doing that. As we saw with the pandemic, I mean, so much of our supply chain has moved overseas, and we've lost the capability to make certain things. But in this case, I think it's very clear to us that we can manufacture many of these components here in the United States, and it's probably best that we do so.
Okay. One last question I have to ask. We see a lot of people, including at the White House now, who are having to limit their activities because of COVID-19. How is it affecting the Department of Energy? Do you have a lot of cases there? Are you having to quarantine people? People work from home. How does it affect the workings of your department?
Sure. Well, we have moved to a maximum telework environment. Many of our employees are working from home. We have very, very few cases here within the department. We have approximately 100,000 employees and federal contractors to our department. And, the numbers that we have in terms of actual cases are less than 500 across the entire complex. So we've been blessed in that regard. I'm also happy to report, though, that we have, our mission here at the department is not only to focus on things like electricity, oil and gas, and the provision of energy. It's also to be the nation's steward of our national nuclear weapon stockpile. And we supply those warheads to the United States Navy, and I'm happy to report that we've not missed a single shipment. Nothing has been delayed, and our employees have performed just admirably throughout this entire pandemic.
Mr. Secretary, I really appreciate your spending time with us again today. It's always good to hear from you. That is Secretary Dan Barrett of the Department of Energy. Coming up here, we're going to turn to a state that depends on energy a lot. That is Alaska. We'll talk with the governor. He is Mike Dunleavy. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
What began in China has expanded worldwide.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Butcher Selection quarter pounder beef burgers, get a 4-pack for just £2.28. And salmon fillets, get a 2-pack for only £2.97. So dinner's always a winner. At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores online, subject to availability.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Hi, I'm Dan from NatWest Manchester branch. We know life's hard right now, but if coronavirus has affected your finances, we're doing our best to make things easier. If you're a personal customer, you can request a 3-month payment break if you're struggling with your mortgage, loan or credit card. Or if you need help with an existing arranged overdraft, you could get £500 interest-free for 3 months. Remember, every one of us is here to support you. There are lots of ways we could help. Search NatWest Coronavirus.
Eligibility and conditions apply to payment breaks. Overdraft up to your agreed limit if lower than £500.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Helen is dreaming of fighting a flock of 40-foot flamingos. But in reality, she's helping fight COVID-19 in her sleep. Like thousands of others, she's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments. I'll fight you. Keep fighting, Helen. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
Dreamlab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
Sports and festivals on hold. Weddings and christenings on hold. Marathons on hold. But not everything is on hold.
My name's Lynn and I have terminal cancer. I don't know how many weeks I have left.
In this time of national emergency, Marie Curie nurses and hospices are needed more than ever. We can only care for dying people like Lynn if you donate. Visit mariecurie.org.uk to donate to our emergency appeal.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Begin to reopen, and we started to reopen about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and we never really had the complete that a lot of states have, but nonetheless we are working through several phases. We'll be opening more up here next week, and that means restaurants will be going up to 75%. Bars will be able to have more folks in their settings. The retail has already been open. So really what we're working on are things like where you'd be shoulder to shoulder in close congregate settings. Those are some of the areas that we're still having discussions with folks on. But nonetheless, we've been very fortunate. We've never really closed the state down like other places have. And at the same time, we've quietly opened up much of the state, and things seem to be working well so far.
So that sounds like a very good report, Governor. Congratulations. I guess I want to know, why do you think that happened? Did you do some things that other people didn't do? Did you get ahead of it earlier? Or is it simply the fact that Alaskans tend to be more spread out than the rest of the country?
Yeah, very good question. It's a combination of things, to be honest with you. So we received that plane from Wuhan, China on January 26th. Which had the U.S. State Department workers and their families that were getting on. We brought them into Anchorage. They were screened in Anchorage and then sent on to California. So we knew early on that something was going on, and we stood up our disaster team, and we turned it into a pandemic team. Alaska has a lot of earthquakes, fires, floods, and so forth. So we have a system up here by which we deal with those disasters, but we had to modify to deal with what could have been a pandemic. So we had stood this up. We were looking at things early on. The other thing that Alaska has going for it, obviously, is we're detached from much of the rest of the country. We are only bordered by Canada, the Yukon Territory, and British Columbia. There's only four roads in and out of Alaska, and three of those are very, very small local roads. One's a little larger, but nonetheless, we were able to limit travel into the state, and we were able to limit air travel into the state as well. That helped tremendously. And so in the end, it's our low numbers. We are spread out, limited travel, but we really we're in the top 10 in testing. We have a great. I have to be honest with you. We have great citizens who have dealt with disasters over the years, and so when you ask them to do something that will help the overall situation for everyone. Everyone in Alaska wants to help out. And so we had a lot of folks that did social distancing and did stay 6 feet apart from each other, et cetera. And so this is all combined to keep our cases down. Again, our testing is in the top 10. We're testing more and more, and we're tracking and tracing. And so we're doing the things we're supposed to do.
Governor, give us a sense about your Native American population up there, because we certainly have heard in the lower 48 some real issues that they tend to have a higher incidence and a higher infection rate. We had the President of the United States actually go to Arizona and meet with Native Americans to talk about that problem specifically. Do you have that problem in Alaska?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. So we have the highest Native population per capita in the country. 15% of our population is Native Alaskan. Eskimo, Aleut, Indians, and so we were watching what was happening in the lower 48 because remember, Alaska suffered tremendously during the Spanish flu of 1918, and the vast majority of folks that died in Alaska were Native Alaskans. And so there is a history and a memory. And we have about 200 communities that are isolated and off a road system. Some of our communities are upwards of 1,000 miles away from any road that leads to anywhere. And most of these are native communities. And so we've worked very closely with them. And in most cases, those communities, we work with them so that they can limit travel into their communities. And as a result, again, we've only had 10 deaths, 390 cases roughly, and only three cases in rural Alaska. So we've been able to contain this spread and keep it out of the vast majority of rural Alaska, including our native villages. And we are very, very, very conscious of making sure that our folks, our Native Alaskans, don't suffer the way folks did back in 1918. So it's working out pretty well as we speak right now.
Okay. Really appreciate your being with us, Governor Mike Dunleavy, and I'm delighted to say he will be remaining with us in the second hour of Balance of Power. We're going to talk to him about how the energy industry is affected by those low oil prices up in Alaska. In the meantime, here we are going to actually talk about the Supreme Court arguments that were held today. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
There are times when you have to go it alone. But these should not be those times.
With a medical crisis, can any other central bank execute?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Ferro.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, the things break.
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon N.A. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. The Supreme Court is holding some potentially historic arguments today in a couple of cases involving President Trump's tax records. One with a request coming from the Congress, the other from a grand jury here in New York City. We welcome now Greg Farrell. He is our legal and investigative reporter. So, Greg, I got to hear about an hour of the arguments. I had to come do this program in the meantime. It's fascinating, but they are two quite different cases in some senses, right?
Yes, exactly. They've been lumped together. The House, Committee on Financial Services wants access to Trump's tax records, or one of the House committees does, controlled by Democrats. And in the case of the second case, it's New York District Attorney Cyrus Vance is doing a follow-up investigation on the Michael Cohen guilty plea, on the information that came out as part of that federal case several years ago. In both cases, the president is fighting against the disclosure of his personal tax returns. So some of the questions that have come from the justices in the first case are focused on whether or not, a precedent would be bad to have basically a competing party in the House of Representatives able to harass a sitting president without a stated legislative goal. And now the argument that's going on now concerning the criminal inquiry, the grand jury process in Manhattan, involves basically some of the disclosures that were made with Michael Cohen's guilty plea, namely that the Trump organization, before Donald Trump became president, and then afterwards, basically manipulated its books and records to pay off Cohen for the money he had advanced to at least one of the women who had promised to go public with her personal story, allegations about Trump during the campaign. So it will be interesting to see if the Supreme Court comes down as a unit on both of them. I suspect there'll be a slightly different ruling or arguments to each one.
Yeah, and it's always impossible, having had experience doing this, impossible to figure out what the justices are really thinking for their questions. But I thought that they did focus on a couple of things that are different from what we've seen before. First of all, this is not a presidential executive privilege case. This is not something that happened while he was in office. These records pertain to what he did before he came to office. And also, he doesn't have to turn them over. They're in a third party's possession, so he doesn't have to go to any trouble. It's his accountant, people like that can turn it over.
Yes, exactly. And also, part of the president's defense is that, in essence, I think Jay Sekulow said something along the lines of, not that he's above the law, but a better way of phrasing that he should not be, treated as an ordinary citizen. That will be tough for justices to sign off on a statement like that, or to basically affirm in that. So yes, this is not the whole argument that the president has used in other areas, like with Special Counsel Robert Mueller, that certain communications are protected by executive privilege, would not apply here.
Yeah, and as you suggest, Greg, actually the president's position really puts the court in a tough position because it's such an almost absolute claim. There's not much give.
Yeah, exactly. So this is fascinating. Again, on both sides, there'll be a lot to tease out. It'll have a real impact if there is a decision to disclose, because that will obviously then come in the summer and fall of an election campaign. So this is just a huge day of arguments at the Supreme Court.
It sure is. It's fascinating for those of us who like to follow that. Thank you so much to Greg Farrell for that coverage. In the meantime, we have some breaking news right now. The Democrats have released their bill for some further relief that includes money for elections and USPS, that is the Postal Service, also has $75 billion for testing and tracing. Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, is due to speak at 3 o'clock this afternoon. That's Eastern Time. That does it for the first hour of Balance of Power, but there will be a second hour of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio, where we'll be resuming our discussion with the Alaskan governor. He is Mike Dunleavy. That does it for Balance of Power on television. I'm David West.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. A handful of Americans are starting to say things they have not said for weeks. Waiter, check please. OpenTable data, which tracks 54,000 restaurants, has shown its bookings down 100% year on year, almost every day since March 21st, and now it's only down 98%. And who are these brave, hungry 2%ers? Customers in Oklahoma, Texas, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. It's small but significant progress for an industry that's estimated to have lost $80 billion in sales during the lockdown. Pigskin-loving Americans are not buying. Usually when the National Football League releases its schedule, that jumpstarts billions of dollars in sales of tickets and television ads. Instead, ticket brokers saw only 15% of the usual action. The NFL's official position is that the 17-week season is expected to start on time, but refunds or credits are possible if games are disrupted. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
You're living in a world built on science, political and economic.
You've got to believe the labour market gets hit.
Computer and medical.
Clarify where we are on a test.
It all makes a difference.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of governmental response?
And it's all here.
He expects the virus to peak quite a long time from now.
Get your science straight.
The hand washing campaign, is this actually a good strategy?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelota. Mixed Tuesday, stocks are fluctuating as the top U.S. infectious disease official reiterated his warning against reopening the economy too soon amid the coronavirus pandemic. S&P 500 swung between gains and losses as Anthony Fauci said states reopening too quickly, quote, could even set you back on the road to economic recovery. Here's where we stand. S&P down now by 1 point, little change, down less than 0.1%. The Dow is up 19. That is a gain of about 0.1%. And NASDAQ is up 41, an advance for NASDAQ of 0.5%, and bringing its year-to-date gain now to 2.9%. 10-year up 3/32 with a yield of 0.70%. Gold is up 0.3%, $17.02 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude surging 8.1%, up $1.95 a barrel now at $26.10 on West Texas Intermediate crude. Sources say Uber Technologies has made an offer to acquire Grubhub in a move that would build out its food delivery platform, even as it shutters parts of its own service abroad. Grubhub shares surging 36%. Uber is up now by 8.8%. Gold up 0.3%, $17.02 the ounce. And with more on the commodities picture, here's Bloomberg's Renita Young.
Crude oil demand continues to show signs of recovery, and Saudi Arabia pledges to unilaterally deepen its production cuts. Oil, however, is still down about 60% this year, with little clarity about when and if global consumption will return to pre-virus levels. And in gold, concerns about an increase in coronavirus infections and trade tensions support haven demand. Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
It is 1:02 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here he is working from home, Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are higher, unlike U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is up 0.3%, and the S&P 500 is down 0.1%. The UK's Vodafone Group has climbed 7.9% in U.S. trading. The mobile phone company's earnings for the fiscal second half beat analysts' average estimate in a Bloomberg survey. Revenue for the 6 months ended in March also was higher than projections. India's Vedanta has jumped 25%. Billionaire Anil Agarwal offered to buy out the metal producer's other shareholders in a deal valued at more than $2 billion. Agarwal has a 50.1% stake in Vedanta. France's Airbus has lost 5.7%. The Irish airline Ryanair said it's looking to replace Airbus's A320 planes flown by its Lauda unit with equivalent jets from Boeing. And Germany's ThyssenKrupp has fallen 13.5%. The steelmaker expects to report a loss this quarter that's equivalent to about $1.1 billion. ThyssenKrupp said the coronavirus will weigh on a planned overhaul of its business, Charlie.
All right, we thank you very much, Dave Wilson. The coronavirus pandemic is not slowing Popeye's expansion plans in China, even after the deadly pathogen caused a record collapse in the country's restaurant sector. The chain CEO says China will become its second largest market in 2 to 3 years. Recapping equities mix, the Dow turning lower now, down 13, down 0.1%. S&P down 5, down 0.2. NASDAQ higher by 29, up by 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Speaker Pelosi announces the Democrats plan for $1 trillion in more relief. The Supreme Court hears historic arguments on President Trump's tax records, and Alaska comes to terms with the pandemic and loss of oil revenue at the same time. From New York, welcome to the second hour of Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Every state in the union is dealing with the fallout from the pandemic as it hits both revenues and costs. And that includes Alaska, which relies on revenue from its oil industry and from tourism, two segments that have been particularly hit hard. Still with us is Governor Mike Dunleavy of Alaska. So, Governor, thank you so much for staying with us. Give us a sense about the economy, how it's doing in Alaska right now.
Well, it's tough. I mean, right, the day before this pandemic hit, we had record investment in Alaska. We had a renaissance in our oil patch on the North Slope, billions of dollars of new investment. We were anticipating 200,000 to 250,000 new barrels of oil would come online within the next 5 to 7 years. Record unemployment, a record low foreclosure rate. Everything was going in the right direction, and then it hit, and it would turn basically day into night. And so for Alaska, we had a robust cruise industry. We have a robust tourist industry. We had the largest oil fields in North America on the slope. All of these were hits. Our airline industry, Alaska depends upon air travel tremendously. That was hit hard. And we have the largest fishing fleet basically in the country, and we're trying to make sure that we can do our fishing this year. We have the largest red salmon runs in the world, tremendous king salmon runs. We supply restaurants and stores all over the world with our fish, and so we're hoping to save that, but it's been brutal. It's been tough. There's no doubt about it.
Oil production happens around the calendar year, but tourism not so much necessarily. Is this year going to be almost a loss for Alaska in terms of tourism? Do you hope to get some tourists up there this summer?
You know, we hope to, but sure, it's going to be a huge hit. I would say it's going to be off by 80-90% at least. And you're right, it is seasonal. 4 months of the year, May, June, July, August, a little bit of September. And that's the vast majority of our tourist season. And it really impacts, for example, our southeast towns of Juneau, Ketchikan, Skagway, but also Anchorage and Fairbanks. And so those numbers are going to be way down. It's going to have a huge impact, not just on jobs, but on local municipal revenue. So this thing has been unlike anything Alaska's ever seen.
We just talked to the Secretary of Energy, Dan Durrett, in the first hour of Balance of Power, and he echoed what the president tweeted today, which is basically he thinks the oil U.S. industry is going to be coming back here because we now have oil prices coming back up. Are you seeing any evidence of a resurgence yet in the oil industry up there in Alaska?
Well, we're seeing an increase in price. I mean, starting back at 420 when it went negative for the first time, it's been increasing basically almost every day. And so today, it's at $24.87. This is Alaska North Slope crude, which is West Coast-based oil. So it's climbing back up. But again, this is nothing near the $60-some barrel oil it was for some time this past year. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know if it's going to get back into the 30s and possibly the 40s. But we do know that with this price war between the Russians, the Saudis, focused on our fractors in the lower 48, it's impacting Alaska greatly. And so we're going to have some decisions, have some discussions and make some decisions on what our budgets are going to look like going forward. We can't rely on a high oil price for this.
Well, I was going to ask about that because you had some difficulties with your budget a couple of years ago, as it were, that got some attention. So it hasn't been that easy for you with your budget. What's it going to look like? Are you going to have to cut services?
Well, it's going to be tough. I mean, that's certainly going to have to be part of the discussion because prior to this pandemic, again, everything was moving in the right direction. And, folks were contemplating a discussion around sales tax, for example, for the state. Well, with the economy in the shape it's in now and the fact that government is bailing out businesses, not businesses bailing out government, I don't know how you could tax in this environment. And so we're going to have some serious conversations around what we're going to do for revenue. We're fortunate in Alaska that we have a permanent fund where we put some of our oil money over the decades. But nonetheless, it's going to be difficult, and we're going to have some difficult conversations here.
We do now have a Democratic plan for another round of relief that includes assistance for the state. Something that, as far as we can tell, is dividing Republicans actually on the Hill some. We see a real difference of opinion about whether the states need and deserve assistance. Do you want assistance from the federal government?
Well, we believe that what occurred was initiated by the government, the state governments and the federal government to an extent. And so with the economy shut down to deal with the health issue, we don't have much of a choice because we can't print money. Now, with that said, what we would have preferred, at least up here in Alaska, is a lot more flexibility in the early money that they had given us. And that would have helped tremendously. And we're still trying to get flexibility in some of that CARES package. But to just get more money, spend more money, but not have it targeted and not have it flexible for governors and legislators to determine what's the best use at their state level and their municipal level, I'm not sure if that's the best use of additional money. So flexibility is going to be key no matter what happens.
We saw a fair amount of bipartisanship in the early days of the crisis in Washington. That seems to be breaking down, perhaps a little more partisanship coming back in. What's it like up in Alaska? Is everyone pulling together because this is a big enough crisis you can't afford to be a Democrat or a Republican?
Exactly. I would say that's exactly it, and we're fortunate. We're like everywhere else. We have our politics and we have our moments, but I would say from the moment this crisis hit, the idea of a Democrat and Republican became a non-issue. It was Alaskans first, and we tend to do this. Again, I've said this before. We have a lot of disasters up here with earthquakes and volcanoes and floods, etc. And so when that happens, we all become Alaskans, and I think that's the way it should be. And so we've done pretty well in that. You don't hear a lot of infighting. There's certainly a lot of us, including myself, that want to get back to normal.
I bet that's right. Okay, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you with us. That's Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy. Coming up, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has taken a good deal of criticism for his approach to the pandemic. But Bloomberg opinion columnist Joe Nacero says that there may be a good deal of sense in his approach. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This probably wasn't what you expected.
Deaths from the coronavirus continue to climb.
But now you need to become an expert fast.
For the very latest, we're joined live.
You'll do it with the latest information, and we'll be right here to help.
Are you concerned that the economic damage could linger longer than the virus itself?
Bloomberg Daybreak with Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager. Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Bloomberg and Eaton Vance are proud to present a Boston Pop salute to our heroes. This Independence Day, the orchestra's 4th of July tradition continues. The program will feature guest artists, highlights from past fireworks displays, new music paying tribute to the heroes of the current health crisis, and honoring the memories of those we have lost. Watch and listen Saturday, July 4th, starting at 8 Eastern, exclusively on Bloomberg Television and right here on Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
For more than 20 years, Asda supported our communities. We've raised over £23 million for Fair Share and the Trussell Trust. And recently, we've donated supplies to frontline NHS workers and carers. We've always been proud to serve those around us. Visit asda.com/creating change for better. Asda, we're all in this together.
TSB believe in people helping people. So if you need a repayment holiday on your TSB mortgage, loan or credit card, get in touch and TSB will do what they can to help. To apply, go to tsb.co.uk. Interest will continue to apply and you will pay more interest overall. Terms and conditions apply.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries, just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks continue to trade mixed. The Dow, the S&P, they are both lower. NASDAQ higher, barely holding on to a gain of 1 point right now. Little changed on NASDAQ. The S&P is down 13, a drop there of 0.4%. The Dow is down 85 points, a drop of 0.4%. Stocks have been fluctuating as the top U.S. infectious disease official, Anthony Fauci, reiterates his warning against reopening the economy too soon amid the coronavirus pandemic. The 10-year up 7/32 with a yield of 0.68%. Gold is up 0.3%, $17.03 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil rallying 7.7% right now, $26 a barrel on WTI, higher by $1.85. Recapping, equities now lower across the board. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, and NASDAQ 100 index all trading lower. S&P down 15 now, a drop of 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's time now for Bloomberg Opinion, and we welcome Joe Nocera. It's always great to have Joe Nocera with us, but he has a column out today on the Bloomberg, and the headline is Florida's plan for reopening is worth rooting for. And it's a little contrarian, Joe, I'd say, not surprising from you, because there is a tendency, at least up in the Northeast, to sort of think that Ron DeSantis, the governor down in Florida, isn't doing too good a job. You say maybe not, maybe he is doing a good job.
First of all, David, before I say anything else, isn't it comforting to hear Charlie in these difficult times reading out the top states?
That is totally right. I get that comfort every day, and I look forward to it. Very well said. That's right.
So I've been looking closely at the numbers, and you have to. People in the Northeast think it's all like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Michigan. All states that have been hit pretty hard. Detroit's gotten clobbered. Boston's gotten clobbered. But if you look down south, you see Florida has 1,700 deaths. Texas, a state with 29 million people, 1,000 deaths. Nevada, very low numbers. California, very low numbers, especially Southern California. So you start to wonder, you know, what's going on here? And what has been upsetting to me about all of this is watching the blue states and the red states sort of fight each other and say, see, your way of doing it isn't right. My way is the right way. You know, one side arguing for total lockdowns and the other saying, no, we don't need lockdowns. We can let people out and we don't need to wear masks and we don't need to do social distancing. And so what I'm trying to say here is, look, folks, the virus is acting differently or treating different parts of the country differently. We don't know why that is. It's probably density to some extent. Maybe it's the weather to some extent. You know, maybe it's people are more outdoors in one place than the other. We don't know. But given the fact that the numbers are so dramatically different in different parts of the country, shouldn't we think that we don't need to treat the treatment shouldn't be the same everywhere in the country? That's the core thing I was trying to say.
Well, and one of the things I took away from your piece, and there were several things, but one of the things I took away, we all like to say we like to follow the data and the science. And by the way, we like to criticize others that we think aren't doing that. But maybe we're not doing that ourselves. I mean, one of the key facts I took out of this, correct me if I'm wrong, is the mortality rate from COVID-19 in Florida, which is, as you say, the third most populous state, is 0.008%. So
that's at the I should note that that's of the total population. That's how. And I think that's an appropriate way to calculate it. Obviously, not everybody calculates it that way. So I just want to point that out.
But if you're just going to follow the data and the science, that would suggest that something's going on in Florida. Now, as you say, maybe it's luck. Maybe there's something else going on down there. But something's going on, and we owe it to ourselves to try to figure out what that is, which is part of what your piece tries to go through and has some hypotheses.
Right. So the thing is, we do have data. We just don't know what the underlying science is yet because we haven't figured this virus out. So the epidemiologists, I mean, they're absolutely right in saying, that historically, staying at home and staying inside and quarantining yourself is the right thing to do. But it's not necessarily always the right thing, given that there are economies at stake here. There's the potential for a depression, and that because we don't have enough testing, we don't know how much risk we're taking when we decide to reopen or to stay closed. I mean, that is a major, I didn't really get into the piece, but a major problem here is we don't have enough testing, which is the failure of the federal government. And because we don't have enough testing, we have to take risks.
But you did quote one person as saying that, in fact, Ron DeSantis had really ramped up testing and tracing a lot, that he's on this thing.
Florida has done a better job. Nobody's done a perfect job just because there aren't enough tests. Florida has done a better job than many other states. It has particularly done a better job in the nursing home area, which is, a proportion of deaths in nursing homes is about 1/3 nationwide. And so, you have to give him credit for that, for sure. That's been a New York failure, honestly. Nursing homes, until very recently, they weren't focused on it.
Another point I took away from your piece, Joe, was sort of, if I can put it this way, horses for courses. That, one size doesn't fit all. What's right for New York is not necessarily what's right in Florida. And even within Florida, the governor was criticized because he didn't have necessarily a statewide approach. Up in the north, Mayor of Orlando was critical, down in the south, Miami. But you're saying, but the counties actually differ within Florida.
That's right. There's a lot of rural areas in Florida. There are a lot of areas where, even though there are cities, I guess they're not that dense. Where the hospitalization and death count is very low. And one of the things DeSantis is doing down there is he's continuing the stay-at-home strategy in Miami and Palm Beach because they're the hardest hit, while loosening it up everywhere else. To me, that's a sensible way. That's a sensible way to go.
Does this, to some extent, let me put this in a grand scale, sort of really confirm the wisdom of the federal system? Maybe we should have different states taking different approaches.
Well, here's the thing. I agree with that. I mean, no president can really tell a governor, how to open or close a state. However, I also believe very, very strongly that federal mobilization in areas such as testing and getting ventilators and PPE and all of that could have made a gigantic difference. And that's the role of the federal government here, to mobilize. And it didn't do that. And it's been a disaster.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much to Joe Nocera. Always great to have him on. You can read more on this and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing in OPIN GO. Coming up, the Supreme Court is hearing oral arguments today on whether President Trump's tax records need to be turned over to authorities. My colleague June Grassa and I talk with Bloomberg Law Supreme Court reporter Kimberly Robinson about this really important Supreme Court argument. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Wall Street is keeping its moves small today. Investors are watching moves to reopen the economy around the country and listening to Dr. Anthony Fauci testify before Congress. He warns that opening too soon could cause needless suffering and death. The Dow is falling 28 points, NASDAQ up 27, S&P 500 down 6. Uber wants to buy Grubhub. Bloomberg News reports the two companies are in talks and that Uber has made an offer for the rival restaurant delivery company. And the CEO of Boeing predicts at least one airline will fail because of the pandemic. Airlines are receiving billions of dollars in federal bailouts, but Dave Calhoun says the support ends in September and travel won't rebound to even 25% of previous levels by then. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. Bloomberg and Eaton Vance are proud.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
For more than 20 years, Asda supported our communities. We've raised over £23 million for Fair Share and the Trussell Trust. And recently, we've donated supplies to frontline NHS workers and carers. We've always been proud to serve those around us. Visit asda.com/creating change for better. Asda, we're all in this together.
We're all having to get used to the new normal. And at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck and it's new problem solved.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
If you're buying anything online, take care and don't pay by money transfer. Always pay by card. Take time to check the seller is genuine, and if you're unsure, then stop and don't send any money.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Pauline. Love may be blind, but it has a new smell.
Pauline, the new fragrance from Euro Millions winner Pauline Hinchcliffe.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £55 million. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, can the president shield his records from judicial and legislative review while he's in office? That's the question before the Supreme Court, and my colleague June Grasso is here to take us through it. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellett.
Hi, thank you very much, David Weston. We are now lower across the board with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all slumping. S&P down 17, drop there of 0.6%. The Dow now down 121 points, down 0.5, and NASDAQ down 17, a drop there of 0.2%. Last update, we told you stocks were fluctuating, now lower across the board. Stocks are falling as the top infectious disease official, Anthony Fauci, reiterates his warning against reopening the economy too soon amid the coronavirus pandemic. The 10-year up at 10.30 seconds with a yield of 0.67%. Gold up 0.3%, 17.02 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil rallying 7% right now, up $1.67 a barrel at $25.81. The National Federation of Independent Business reports its small business optimism index dropped in April to a 7-year low. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
It's been decades since small business owners have been this pessimistic about the revenue outlook. They're also putting a hold on hiring and investment. And yet a greater share anticipate a brief recession following the coronavirus outbreak. So there is some optimism. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Sources say Uber Technologies is making an all-stock offer to acquire food delivery company Grubhub. Grubhub shares surging 36.5%, Uber up 6.3%, and as Hertz Global Holdings works to stay out of bankruptcy, the company has canceled 90% of its new car purchases for the 2020 model year, a move likely to further depress fleet sales by major automakers. Hertz shares down 5.5%. Recapping, the equities trading lower now with the S&P down 16, down 0.6%, gold up 0.3%, 17.02 the ounce. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. And once again, here's your host, David Weston.
Thanks so much, Charlie Pellet. President Trump has worked hard to protect his tax records from public disclosure. But now a Manhattan prosecutor and a congressional committee say they need to see the records as part of two different investigations. And the Supreme Court is hearing arguments today about whether a presidential privilege protects the president in these circumstances. To go over what looks to be an historic ruling, I'm joined now by my colleague June Grasso and by Bloomberg Law Supreme Court reporter Kimberly Robinson. So welcome to both of you. Kimberly, to start with you, I must say I was glued to my computer until I had to come on the air to listen to the first hour or so of arguments. These are two different cases. What difference does it make that one comes out of the Congress and one comes out of a Manhattan prosecutor?
Well, to the bottom line of the issue of whether or not President Trump's tax information is released to these entities or even to the public, maybe not very much. But in the bigger issue about the relationship between the different branches of government, it matters a lot. So in the first case here, we're talking about the relationship between Congress and the president. And in the second, we're talking about the relationship between the president and the states. And so in that sense, it's a very big difference.
This is also perhaps different from some of the prior cases that came up. For example, with Richard Nixon when he was president, in the sense that these are not records pertaining to what he did when he was in office. It does not interfere with the operations of the White House. And by the way, he doesn't have the records anyway. They're being sought from a third party. Does that weaken the president's claim?
Well, for some of the justices, it certainly did. But for others, it actually made it stronger. So we saw a lot of the Democratic justices really push on this idea that the subpoenas weren't seeking information about his official actions as actually making the House and the DA's arguments actually stronger, because nobody is protected from their public life. No Americans, not even the president. But we saw some of the more conservative justices say that Congress and the DA's office have no business poking into the personal lives of anyone, not even the president.
And Kimberly, did you see that when the questioning came to the New York prosecutor's office, the attorney representing them, Carrie Dunn, it seemed less combative than it did with the congressional subpoenas?
Right. So we mentioned some of the differences in the case. And so all along there's been speculation that even though the issues are very similar, they could come out differently. And there did really seem to be a lot broader agreement among the justices and even among the advocates in the case with the Manhattan DA. In particular, it seems like everybody seems to agree that there should have to be some kind of heightened showing for states to be able to get these records. And really it's just going to be about hammering out how strong that showing has to be and how easy it would be for the states to get a hold of these records that they need to engage in criminal prosecutions.
And I heard some interesting terms. We had now temporary presidential immunity was something that the president's lawyers were pushing. And then speculative mental distress, referring to the distress the president would get just because they're doing the inquiry and turning over the records.
Well, right. So this goes back, your last point goes back to something that David mentioned, was that, these records are not in possession of the president. So it's not something like the Watergate tapes that President Nixon had access to, or even the deposition that President Clinton himself had to go and submit to. These are records that are held by third parties, which the attorney pointed out the president may not even be aware of their existence. And so that's definitely a factor that was playing on the justices' minds when they're talking about, what kind of burden there is. On the flip side, the president's attorney says it's not just about having to produce documents. That's not the only burden they're talking about here. It's about having to worry about having a criminal prosecution hanging over your head and having to worry about your political enemies trying to undermine you through official means.
Kimberly, is it possible the president in his position, through his lawyers, is making the job of the Supreme Court harder here? Because as far as I can tell, it feels almost like an absolute privilege. No way, no how. And courts don't usually like to have it that black and white.
Well, that's right. And that's really where we saw a lot of the work being done by the justices today, trying to figure out if there was not this kind of absolute immunity that the president is arguing for. And there seemed like a number of justices were not buying that argument. But if there isn't this kind of absolute immunity, where should the immunity be? There really was kind of an agreement among the justices that the president is special in some way. And it's really just trying to figure out how that translates to these kind of more normal legislative and criminal proceedings.
So, Kimberly, we always say you can't tell what the justices are going to do from the arguments. But looking at this argument, listening to it, it seemed as if it wasn't going to be the kind of unanimous decision you had in the Nixon tapes case.
Well, that's right. And that's really something really interesting to note, because both during Justices Gorsuch and Justices Kavanaugh's contentious confirmation hearings, they were asked about whether or not they would be able to stand up to the president if cases against them were to come before them. And they both pointed to Nixon and Clinton cases as a really pinnacle of the rule of law, where all of the justices were unanimous. And I just don't see that happening in these cases. There really was an ideological divide among the justices, at least with regard to the House case.
Kimberly, is there one big difference between this and Nixon? They kept talking about the Nixon case, but one big difference. It was clear why they wanted the records in the Nixon case. Is it clear what the Manhattan prosecutor wants it for? Because, I mean, can he prosecute for this if, in fact, he gets records that would indicate it merits prosecution? Doesn't he have to wait till after he's done being president?
Well, yes, there is an acknowledgement by the Manhattan TA that they would have to wait. They're saying they need to be able to do the investigation now so that, memories don't fade, evidence doesn't go away. But you're right that the president's attorneys say that the situation here is different, that what Congress and what the Manhattan DA's office really wants to do is not to get to the bottom of any ethical violations, but they really want to just embarrass and harass the president. And they say that's what makes this case different.
One of the things that struck me, Kimberly, I don't know if it did, and you as well, June, it's so different when they're on remote, because Chief Justice Roberts kept interrupting, cutting them off, saying, that's the end of your time. It was a very different dynamic on the bench, if you can call it that.
Right, and also because the justices are taking turns, so it's so orderly, and at times, they cut off the questions, and sometimes the answers. At one point, you could hear Justice Thomas at the very end saying, we know it's about the president, as he was being cut off, so it was a different kind of court.
Yeah, another time, Justice Thomas didn't show up. I mean, Chief Justice Roberts called him several times and then went and got on to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
That happens a lot in these interviews. They don't have their mute on. All the justices seem to do it.
Who can blame him? I can't run this technology, that's for sure. Okay, thank you so much to Bloomberg's June Grasso and to Kimberly Robinson. Coming up here, remote learning in college. It's been tried, but will the pandemic turbocharge a fundamental change in higher education? We're going to talk with Chip Pausick. He is CEO of 2U. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, Visit HUD.gov/fair housing. That's HUD.gov/fair housing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
In-depth analysis.
Did somebody say just eat?
Me, get delivery like a G. See, hungry dogs gotta eat. I get mines every day, every week. Chicken wings to the crib, I'm sitting in. Burger in the low. Hope they put the pickle in. Wonton on a catamaran. Oodles and noodles, thank you, my man. J-U-S-T-E-A-T.
Somebody say just eat.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Butcher's Selection quarter pounder beef burgers, get a 4-pack for just £2.28. And salmon fillets, get a 2-pack for only £2.97. So dinner's always a winner. At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores online, subject to availability.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
If you're buying anything online, take care and don't pay by money transfer. Always pay by card. Take time to check the seller is genuine, and if you're unsure, then stop and don't send any money.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Pauline, love may be blind, but it has a new smell.
Pauline, the new fragrance from Euro Millions winner Pauline Hinchcliffe.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £55 million. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Sports and festivals on hold. Weddings and christenings on hold. Marathons on hold. But not everything is on hold.
My name's Lynn, and I have terminal cancer. I don't know how many weeks I have left.
In this time of national emergency, Marie Curie nurses and hospices are needed more than ever. We can only care for dying people like Lynn if you donate. Visit mariecurie.org.uk to donate to our emergency appeal.
Max is dreaming of riding a giant chameleon whilst fighting a clan of ninjas. But in reality, he's helping fight COVID-19 in his sleep. Like thousands of others, he's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments.
I'll fight you.
You go, Max. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
DreamLab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just...
Carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. It's
you're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got stocks lower across the board. Stocks are falling as the top U.S. infectious disease official, Anthony Fauci, says, reiterating his warning against reopening the economy too soon. Amid the coronavirus pandemic, treasuries are climbing. S&P 500 index extending losses. As Fauci said, states reopening too quickly, quote, could even set you back on the road to economic recovery. The S&P 500 index now down 14. That's a drop of 0.5%. Had been fluctuating. The Dow is down 98, down 0.4%. NASDAQ lower by 3, a drop there of less than 0.1%. 10-year yield 0.67%, up 11.30 seconds, with gold up 0.3%, 17.02 the ounce. Another big day for West Texas Intermediate crude, surging 7%, up $1.70 a barrel now at $25.83. Again, recapping equities lower. S&P down 14, lower by 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of power continues. And once again, here's your host, David Weston.
Thanks so much, Charlie. From New York, this is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. EdTech has been gaining a foothold in higher education for several years now, as colleges experiment with online learning as a supplement to what they provide. But the stay-at-home orders across the country are raising more fundamental questions about the future of online versus bricks-and-mortar learning. 2U is an ed tech company working in partnership with many prominent universities across the country, and we welcome now its CEO, Chip Paucek. So, Chip, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, before we get into what comes next, tell us where we've been. Before the pandemic happened, to what extent were universities using what I call ed tech, education technology, remote learning?
Well, I started the company about 12 years ago, and it's been a slow process of gradually improving the acceptance of online education. Higher education overall has been much more physical than online, and the great schools really weren't doing anything online when we started the company. And over the last, let's say, decade, we've seen an increase in the number of high-quality partners. So now today we partner with Georgetown and Harvard and Yale and a bunch of great schools offering high-quality options. But I can tell you, David, the last 60 days, I've talked to more provosts and presidents than I had in the entire 12 years prior. Extraordinary change, literally overnight.
And give us a sense, because there are various people who've tried this, including some universities themselves have tried it, right? They haven't gone outside. They've actually tried to develop themselves. What's the difference in the 2U approach?
Well, we're a partner, not just a platform. So we work with a school over a very long time period to build something really high quality. So online education done well is not what we just saw, where you've got this sort of forced wave of remote learning, like doing something purpose-built to drive high-quality engagement with the student and the faculty together, a combination of live classes, great asynchronous content, a flipped classroom to allow people to study on their own time with great high-quality content. And then when they get to class, they're fully engaged because they're in a broader discussion with a smaller group. So now we also provide a variety of services behind the scenes to help them with the business side of the operation. So it's a comprehensive approach that we call 2UOS to build, deliver, and support world-class higher education at scale.
So flipped classroom, I'm not sure everyone will understand what that means, but one of the things that I understand about this is you have to figure out what online does better and what in-person does better. How does that break down in your experience? I mean, what are you just better at educating on, and what is there that really you really need some physical presence for?
Well, so, we offer programs that you wouldn't expect to be done online, like Yale Physician Assistant or Georgetown Midwifery, where you actually must go and deliver the babies. You don't want to go to the place that delivered the virtual babies. So as an example, that is something that definitively there has to be a physical component to. But a lot of the actual instruction you can do better online if done right. So the interactive exercises that you might have in something like a physician assistant program, where you can actually see the body in a way that you would be difficult to do just in a physical classroom. So being purpose-built for online, you get the best of both worlds. You can get the intimacy of the physical environment, but a higher quality content coming in to allow you to have the better learning outcome. But, doing it all with just appearing in a Zoom room, Zoom is a great partner to you, but that can't be the extent of what you provide for it to really be a high-quality experience.
Is this across all subjects, or are there some subjects that lend themselves more naturally to your technology?
We do think across really all subjects today. So we've become one of the largest technology training companies in the country, working with great university partners. So we have short courses that range from sustainability by Cambridge to leadership, diversity courses, technology courses like blockchain. And then on the degree side, we go all the way up to very high-quality advanced degrees. We also launched our first undergraduate degree, which I would tell you is we announced it before we found out about COVID. Obviously, had no idea this pandemic was going to happen, but very good timing. So the London School of Economics is working with us on 7 different undergraduate degrees. And then last week, we announced Simmons University out of Boston will be our first U.S.-based undergraduate degree. So we don't think it's specific to a particular subject. We do think this is broadly applicable. Online allows you to be more relevant, more accessible, more affordable. And in some ways, I think we're staring overnight at the hybridization of all of higher ed. We didn't expect it to happen, but it is indeed happening right now.
Does it work better in your experience at the graduate level than the undergraduate level? Because I know if you come down to secondary and primary school, there's some real struggles. When you get down to primary school, it's hard to do online.
Look, there are clearly some incredible benefits to the experience that I had when I went to GW and, got a Pell Grant to attend, first-generation college graduate. It completely changed my life. So we're big believers in the physical campus. But the entire world doesn't go to a school like Harvard or GW. You've got a very large number of people that desperately need the training to get ahead, and particularly right now. And we think online is very much part of the solution. So an interesting stat for you about our London School of Economics program, it has not yet launched. It will launch actually in October. But between March and April, we saw a 216% increase in demand for that program. We've never seen this before. And what was equally interesting is the age ranges. So you're talking about, almost a third being in their 20s. So you've got people that in their early 20s. So you've got people that were more traditional college students looking for this kind of option today.
Give us a sense of the business model. I mean, you're a for-profit organization, I assume. How does the money flow? How do you charge? How does the university pay for it? And what does the university take out of the rest of its budget? Where does it come from?
So we share tuition revenue with universities over the life of various contract lengths. In our short course business, it's a smaller footprint, so it's a smaller investment. In our degree business, we will spend somewhere between $2 and $5 million of net negative cash over the first several years. We put the investment in, and we take a longer term revenue share. I do think the investment side of this equation is something that doesn't get talked about enough in all of the entire discussion about higher ed. Today we've seen an increasing demand from universities, in part due to the fact that we can build something high quality, and 2U does bring the investment component to the table. So it's become even more important here in the last couple of weeks.
But in success, you said you don't think that the physical campus will go away. It's going to look different in success for the 2Us of this world. It's got to come from somewhere.
I mean, I would say, David, like our Simmons announcement last week, it's I think one of the boldest things you've seen any university do in the world, candidly, as a response to this pandemic. So Simmons took their entire university online with us. So you're thinking about not just getting the students there, helping the campus students, but doing something longer term.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It is the future, no question about it. Thank you so much to Chip Paucek. He is CEO of 2U. And that does it for today's version of Balance of Power. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
For more than 20 years, Asda supported our communities. We've raised over £23 million for Fair Share and the Trussell Trust. And recently, we've donated supplies to frontline NHS workers and carers. We've always been proud to serve those around us. Visit asda.com/creating change for better. Asda, we're all in this together.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Please be wary of text messages containing links. They may appear to be from legitimate senders like the government, a bank or a delivery company, but never enter your online banking information or personal details after clicking on a link.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
.com on the Bloomberg Business app and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Mazur and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed, everyone. Live from New York and New Jersey, streaming on YouTube. It is Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. And Jason, safe to say, all eyes on Capitol Hill today. But what's interesting, not everybody was on Capitol Hill as the testifying and testimonies were going on.
That's exactly right. A lot of remote folks coming in, including Dr. Anthony Fauci. I believe he may be the best known man in America. I mean, he could end up as people's sexiest man alive at this point. I feel like.
Well, you know, the room rater, I wonder how they rated his room.
Yeah, good question.
Check that out.
We're going to have to look into that over the course of the show.
Well, and we should point out, though, we're having some fun, but a stiff warning from Dr. Fauci, and that is definitely weighing on the equity market. So we're going to talk about that. And also, there's more talk and debate about help for those impacted, right? Because we know it's going to be severe. It is severe already.
Absolutely. We're expecting to hear later on this afternoon from House Speaker Pelosi. So, as you say, all eyes on Washington. We'll keep an eye on that as well as the market reaction. Speaking of market reaction, let's talk to Charlie Pellet. He's got an update on that trade. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there, and let's begin with a developing story out of Washington, D.C. in terms of the budget deficit, and a headline from the Bloomberg Professional Service. The U.S. reports a record monthly budget deficit of $737.9 billion. Equities all over the map today have been fluctuating. NASDAQ just a moment ago was positive, just turned negative.